Right then, let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery. As always, a huge thank you to MK Battery for their continued support of the podcast and Powerchair Football coverage across England. My name is Ryan Sipple, and joining me for episode 56 once again is Gregg Baxter and Charlie McLellan. Gentlemen, how are we both?
I'm good, thank you, Ryan. It's been a while, but Powerchair football remains raging on, and we've got a lot to talk about today. Some very diverse topics, which is nice. Should be a bit more of a laid-back episode than when we sort of go through every single team and every single game after a National League weekend. But yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Very good. Greg, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Looking forward to having a nice little relaxed chat about the sport we love and having a little bit of a freedom to, branch off and have got some tangents if we want to.
Absolutely. And on that, I think it's worth just kind of explaining it because usually I head into these episodes with pages and pages of prep, a clear running order. But I thought for this one, it's better to just sit down, have a conversation around everything that's happened recently because it feels like there has been so much going on across the sport over the last 3 weeks. So yeah, excited to get into it. Just kind of the bullet points. We've had the 2026 EPFA Home Nations up in Scotland, with England retaining the title once again. Plenty of interesting storylines around the squad selection and performances, which we'll get into. Then, of course, all roads led to Bring the Noise at Derby Arena, enhanced and expanded for 2026. We had 10 matches across the day, both the John Good Group WFA Cup and the inaugural WFA Vars decided, and yet another record attendance for a Powerchair football event in England. So excited to unpack that in more detail. And then kind of looking forward, we've got the National League playoffs Saturday, June the 6th, across both the Premiership and the Championship, followed by the end of season awards at the King Power Stadium, where we'll celebrate the standout achievements from across the 25-26 season, both on and off the court. And then a few weeks after that, all attention turns to St George's Park and the FA Disability Cup, with the Powerchair final once again set to be shown live on TNT Sports. I think it's actually free to air on Discovery Plus, which is really exciting. And it's for many that the highlight in the Powerchair football calendar. And then lastly, we can't not mention Friday's announcement with Dean Williams announcing that he will be standing down as chairperson of the WFA following the conclusion of his 3-year term. So they're the bullet points, but as Greg alluded to, creative license to branch off depending on where the conversation goes. There is no agenda, there is no real official run through. So hopefully we can have more podcasts such as this, just to have conversations and talk about things outside of the structure of the National League, the cup competitions and the partners.
Is there a time limit? Are we limited by it? We can have like a 6 hour just talk and discussion and just wax lyrically about whatever we want to.
Am I right in saying that the last podcast that was released was the Premiership recap?
Yeah, it was like 3.5 hours, wasn't it?
It was without question the longest episode we've ever done. I would be very intrigued to get people's thoughts about the length of the podcast, because some people love how long they are and how they're structured into chapters, and everyone is given the same spotlight. But others see three plus hours and don't know how to tackle it. I don't know.
I think you've got the best of both worlds, though, haven't you? Because for those of you that like the long form, and like you said, the last one was like 4 hours because there was just so much to talk about. You can break up a long journey to Nottingham and home, just sticking it on, for example. Whereas if you want the short form and you just want to listen to specific bits, only about your team, then I know, for example, Spotify obviously has the chapters. So you can just click where you want to jump into the podcast, listen to your team if you want, and then click out again. So I think you've got the best of both worlds, really.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like the other podcasts that I do, we get to the hour mark, I'm getting twitchy and needing it to be cut short. But I think that is the thing with the chapters and the way that you can sort of go through and just pick. It's also very easy to just pick up at any moment, like because we do so, or you guys particularly do structure it so well. You can sort of start an episode and not feel like you've missed anything at any point. So yeah, what I would say to people that find, the 3.5 hours consecutively daunting is just break it up into like, if you are like me and you cannot sit and do the same thing for 3.5 hours because you've got TikTok brain or whatever, you can break it up into half an hour chunks, seven little half an hour chunks. Do it throughout, a week, and it will get you through. So yeah, I think we just want as much Powerchair football content out there as possible, don't we? And it's more practical to record it all in one big swoop.
Exactly that. I would be curious to get your boys' opinion. What would you say the average travel time is for a player accessing training? I would say it's 30, 45 minutes.
Oh, you know what? Aspire, I reckon, is around an hour. I reckon is Aspire's average. Yeah, it's not as if people move to go play for their club, so you don't get sort of that footballers showing up 10 minutes away from training.
No.
A lot, and there's some people as well. You've got to think about the people that there's some massive travel commitments, like people that will do like 3 or 4 hours for training, and they'll massively send the average up as well. So. Yeah, I reckon
Yeah,
maybe 40 minutes is the average.
I reckon 45 to an hour.
A-
I'm thinking like Ethan Galloway driving from around Dundee to Middlesbrough. That's going to throw the average up a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, but even taking the Scottish players out of consideration, I think 45 minutes is a comfortable average for players accessing training or competitive opportunities in England. And just to bring it back to the length of the podcast, if I looked at the analytics and the numbers and the viewing figures and saw a massive drop off of retention rate, I wouldn't do it. I would alter the format to appease the community. But we're getting kind of record breaking numbers week in, week out. And that podcast we're referring to of Premiership Game Week 5 is now officially the most listened to podcast we've ever done. So yeah, I will be consistent with the lengths and shining equal spotlights, whether you're first or 12th at the top of the Premiership or the bottom of the Championship. But there is hopefully episodes like this that we can put in between that can be far more informal, that can allow people to tune in and out as they please. So, as mentioned at the top, we've got a few rough bullet points and topics to discuss. And I think it's probably best we keep some chronology to it. So, following the 25-26 Premiership, all attention turned to Largs, where England travelled for the 2026 EPFA Home Nations. Once again, England proved too strong for Ireland, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, securing the Home Nations title for, I think, a fifth consecutive year. Of course, those tuning in will have noticed that this year's tournament felt quite different from an England perspective. Adam McAvoy clearly used it as an opportunity to look at some other players from within the pathway and experiment a little bit more with the squad. And I think there are a lot of interesting talking points about performances and what it potentially means heading towards the World Cup and beyond. Just to quote Adam McAvoy, on that squad that he announced, he says, "We all know the talents and abilities of our more experienced players. So the home nation provides us with an opportunity to test and challenge some of our younger and highly talented players in an England environment. Our senior players have fully supported this decision, which speaks volumes about their professionalism and qualities as both footballers and individuals." Now, Greg, I'll come to you first. You were one of the players brought into the squad for this year's Home Nations. Firstly, how did you find the overall experience, and what do you think worked about that England approach?
It was another cracking weekend in Largs. They always are when we get to go up there. It's a lovely part of Scotland, and the facilities are first rate. And it was obviously an honour and a privilege to get another a senior call up and senior caps under my belt. and the squad's makeup was exciting, I think, for all of us to show what the future of English Powerchair football could look like. And I think it was, massive thank you to Adam and the senior boys in the squad for giving us the opportunity to do that and take up the mantle, so to speak. Because obviously there is expectation when we go to Largs that we want to be winning it. We expect ourselves to be retaining the title, and it made sense from our point of view. Like from an England setup, I think it made sense to rotate and have a look, because I think obviously they've got the World Cup coming up in um, October in Argentina, so we wanted to get match practice with the full squad going to Argentina, whoever that is, but giving an opportunity for those of us on the outside looking in to maybe stake a last minute claim for a spot on the plane, or at least giving some foresight into what, like I said, squads could look like going forwards. And I think, like I said, I think they're planning on having a little mini tournament in July with some of the teams going to Argentina, France, Italy, Denmark, and I think it made sense that you save your four senior players for that tournament where you get good match practice against teams that you'll be potentially facing in Argentina, and then obviously going to Largs with three teams that, with a great respect, aren't going to the World Cup. It gives a nice opportunity to rotate and show what the players we have available in the waiting in the wings can produce, and give debut moments to Ollie Crawshaw and Matt Gilbert, who I thought took their opportunities superbly well. Giving Dan McLellan, Dylan Kelso the opportunity to be the senior figures in the squad and be the experienced heads, which is crazy saying that about Dan, given he's so young. Give them the opportunity to captain their country. So I think it ticked every box that Adam McAvoy and Craig Peaty would have been hoping it did, to be honest.
I think before unpacking what you've just said, I want to throw to Charlie quickly, because how I assess this competition is probably the answer changes depending on the answer. How do you assess the level of the other nations that comprise that tournament? Are they developing? Are they getting better?
It's hard to say, to be honest. I think they're all in a period of transition at the moment. I think not qualifying for the World Cup has meant that all of them have now got basically 2, 3 years until the next major that they need to be ready for, and I think they're all taking that to re-identify themselves. I'd say Ireland looked actually quite good. I like the look of Ireland. I thought some of the four-out football, especially against England, was actually really impressive. The way that they played was really pleasing to me, and I really like Matt Crowley. I really like Matt Crowley as a goalkeeper. I think he's very good. Um, Northern Ireland were the ones that disappointed me, because we were so excited about them after the Euros and saying, oh, this is such a young squad for the future. And it doesn't really look like they've improved since the Euros, which I know it's not that long, but there's been no sort of marked improvement in the style, to be honest. And the fact that they ended up coming fourth, they would have hoped to have been in that final with England in that tournament. And so the fact that they ended up coming fourth place is disappointing. Scotland were the ones that impressed me most. We've all seen Tyler McLellan and how good he is, and for him to take up more of a prominent role, I actually thought Scotland were really good across the weekend. And they have a real potentially strong base to now build off of. And listen, the way that their squad is right now is not ever going to, challenge for a World Cup or win a Euros, but they could really be targeting the next sort of Euros as qualifying for the next World Cup and solidifying that. I actually thought they played really well, and to win that third place playoff and to end up finishing third and getting the bronze medal, I'm sure they all would have taken that before the weekend. And it's small steps for all of these nations, but I think for all of them, not qualifying for the World Cup is a bit of a blessing in disguise. Ireland and Scotland seem to be really using that blessing to redefine themselves and strengthen. And for Northern Ireland, I'd say, what are we waiting for? Let's get cracking. You've got some incredible young players. Let's now set about a real style of play, finding out who your strongest four is, who everyone's positions are. Can we get a couple of them coming over and playing in England potentially? Can Ruben Walls get a move over here at some point? Because that is, and I'm sorry to say it, that is what is going to send their game to the stratosphere. It is categorically a better league. It's categorically a better level, and it will develop him much more. If they do that, they could be really strong. So yeah, that would be my assessment.
Well, that was kind of my next question. Is it a coincidence that we're seeing Scotland and Ireland really focus and prioritise their development with the stronghold of their players competing regularly in England? That we know the infrastructure, the quality of competition, the quantity of competition completely dwarfs what is available in the other home nations, competitive competitions and leagues. So yeah, what do Northern Ireland need to do to really push on? My question also is, does Adam McAvoy experiment to this level if one or two of those nations had qualified for the World Cup? Or did he kind of assess it, see them as they're not going to be nations they compete against in a competitive situation, so it gives him that freedom to experiment?
Yeah, I think this is what I said. They've got two tournaments. They had two tournaments before. They got Largs with teams that haven't qualified, and they've got one they're putting together. Also in Largs, but with France, Denmark, and Italy, three teams that will be there, and at least two of those will be you think will be right challenging, and France will be everyone's favourites. I'd say so. That's a real strong level of competition. You could afford to, if you want to do it, rotate and have a look at what you've got elsewhere and what the future could look like against the three sides that haven't qualified, and then go with the squad that you're planning on taking to Argentina into that tournament in the summer, and then use that as the match practice to get details down without giving too much away, obviously, for the actual competition time in Argentina. But just to echo what Charlie said, I was really impressed with that, especially in the training session on the Friday before the tournament started. Ireland were properly playing four out with Matt Crowley, and I've been raving at him for at least since the Euro. I think he was excellent in the Euros. He was very close to making my world draft when we did that. He just fits the Forest system really well. I was really impressed with them. I think they didn't play it as bravely in the tournament at times as they did in the training session, and I get it's easy to do it in training when it's mostly unopposed. So I think that the handbrake on a little bit during the tournament and in games. But even then, some of the stuff they were playing was really nice. I think they could just afforded to got Matt involved a little bit more uh, in their play. But they were, for a side that have had the disappointment in Italy at the Euros and not qualifying, seem to have really rebounded and taking steps to rectify that really well. And the same, like I say, goes for Scotland, and having most of their players playing in England is clearly having the benefit. And Northern Ireland, it was just a bit disappointing because it was still so defensive. And I get you're going to do that against England, and we knew that they would, and that's the style. But you just, even when they came, you know, they got, even if they came one goal down, they still were sitting back and defending it. It's like, what have you got to lose in this tournament? It means nothing for qualification. It means nothing for anything other than, it's a senior cap for your country. Have a go, try something different. Um, you've got the young players there, especially like Ryan and I, chair, chair and vice chair of the Ruben Walls fan club. Just go at it, try something different. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Nobody's none the wiser.
And that's, I think, my frustration. If we assume that England will win all of the games at any given home nations, we have that breadth of quality. We're allowed to experiment. We have those competitive opportunities which sit below international level. So if England lose a game, it's a shock. I think we would all probably agree that Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Republic of Ireland, taking the most recent home nations out of consideration, are all very similarly matched in terms of their quality and potential. I can understand being reactive and pragmatic, defensive against England. There, to your point, Greg, there is no reason whatsoever to do that against the other nations. Throw caution to the wind, be attacking, take risks. And that was my biggest frustration from the weekend. I don't think we saw enough risks from Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Scotland when they played one another. And Northern Ireland, they've still got an incredibly young, exciting squad. But you do have to ask questions about their club football and how that props up international football as it does in Scotland and the Republic of Ireland. Republic of Ireland, I would say that they've got a very solid squad. They were very exciting. They played some great football. Have they got that stream of talent underneath that core six I think they took? I don't necessarily know. We know of a few players coming through the system in Scotland, and Tyler McLellan still young, incredibly exciting. So, yeah, it threw up a lot of questions to me, and I was left a little bit underwhelmed by how brave or the lack of bravery from those three nations when they played one another. But I will echo what you said. Matt Crowley's a fantastic player. We wax lyrical about him following the Euros, and it's great to see that he's continuing to develop despite only playing in Ireland.
Yeah, I think, like you said, they are all on the same level. Like I think on any given day, um, all three of those nations could beat the other three. That could beat the other two easily, and vice versa. They're tough ones to split and call. And even then, sometimes we didn't have it our own way a lot of the time. There were times where we had to face some adversity, and it wasn't quite clicking, and the performance levels weren't up to scratch. And Adam didn't shy away from telling us that sometimes it wasn't good enough and we weren't meeting the standards. But I just think, yeah, the lack of bravery or, trying some new things in match practice, because how often do these countries play matches like the home nations is all they're going to have for the next 2 years, 2, 3 years. Like, unless they put together something between themselves again, that is their tournament practice as a squad done for 2026. Chalk it off, done. Like what have you got to lose? Use it, because there's no way you can wait another 11 months till it comes back round next year to then do the same thing again and have the handbrake on.
Do you know what I would love to see? And it would be fairly unprecedented. I don't think there's ever been a situation where this has happened. I would like to see Northern Ireland go on a tour of England and set up friendlies against clubs. I know we've seen various versions of England have friendlies against clubs before. We've seen Scotland when they was in their relative infancy, coming down to the likes of Middlesbrough and Leeds and having competitive fixtures. But I think to your point, that is their competition done now for 2026. And this isn't exclusive to Northern Ireland. The same can be applied to the Republic and Scotland as well. Set up friendlies against club sides in England if you can't against the national team, because I think that would be really beneficial.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we've got to acknowledge the fact that obviously our setup in England is miles ahead, and we have all the backing and support and finances do play over. So it's not. I don't think it's as easy for those nations to do that. I think is something that has to be at least considered into the fact. But I do agree that it would be. I think it'd be really beneficial for everyone involved just to get more matches as a squad together. If you can find a way of getting a sponsor involved and just saying, look, we're going to try and do this is our aim. This is what we're trying to do with Powerchair football in this country. Can you help make it happen? Then by all means do it, because the benefits for the squad, just getting more match practice in. You can't have one tournament where you play 4 games every 12 months and think like you can have all the training in the world. You could train every 2 weeks. It's a match practice against opponents that aren't familiar with your game plan that is going to help you improve.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I'm not naive to the fact that there is cost associated with a potential tour across England and big cost as well. But at some point, there has to be that investment in the team, in the performances. Otherwise, the outcome will always be the same.
Yeah, and you say that, there are costs, but the cost of going to the World Cup would be a lot more. So they'll probably have sort of that funding now. They would have had to get that funding for the World Cup anyway. It's going to be a fraction of that to go on a tour of England. So should be should be something that they should be able to organise. And yeah, do it across the summer. The English teams would love it because, they would love that sort of pre-season preparation for the season ahead, playing against a proper competitive side. You could choose to tour the Midlands and play against Villa and West Brom and Aspire, or you could go up north and play against, Teesside, Leeds, Middlesbrough. There's loads of games that I'm sure English teams would be willing to facilitate. And it's not something I've ever considered, Ryan, but I actually really like that shout.
Another another one is there is no way that if one of these three nations wrote to England or the FA and proposed a shared camp, as we saw with the USA last year, that they would reject it. I think England and the WFA would be just as kind of generous with that shared knowledge because they're not a World Cup nation, as that would further them. These are just ideas.
I suppose I agree, but I don't know about you, Chai, but I think what England would get something out of it in a match practice against a squad that isn't their own other four players, 4 versus 4. But I don't
I'm
quite
not.
know.
I'm not looking at this through the lens of an England perspective. I'm looking at it through the others. So you
Oh
could,
yeah,
of course, play devil's advocate, say what do England benefit from that? But I could say on the same side, 2026 Home Nations was the perfect situation because Adam was allowed to experiment, trial new players. But that is what the Home Nation is going to be now. Just an opportunity for England to trial fringe players rather than a really competitive competition going into the unknown. As I said, that's the fifth consecutive year they've won it. That has never been threatened even once.
no, but I think yeah, you play devil's advocate. Like I only say that just because you said that England will jump at the. Oh, well, they hardly wouldn't say no. I think the other three teams actually welcome the fact that we rotated, because while it's on paper not a weaker squad, but obviously not the ones you'd expect to, your John Baldwins, your Chris Gordons, your Marcus Harrison, Jared Commons, those elite four that have been there for, years and years. If they're getting uh battered 7 or 8 nil every single time, I don't think they get as much out of it, and acknowledging where the other three nations are at this moment, playing against a rotated England squad and assessing the level there and giving them more chances, maybe a little bit more space, perhaps sometimes. I think they actually deep down, I think they welcomed it a little bit, or at least maybe some of them did.
I don't disagree because it's about leveling the playing field. But with all due respect to those other nations, that England squad was comprised of half England senior squad and half England development squad. Yes. I honestly believe, and it's more so because of the quality in England, you could take a full squad of National Emergent Talent Programme level squad level players and they would probably still win it. And that sits below the England development team.
Yeah, I do agree. And did we? You say we took a weakened squad, but we're still taking, the starting four in the final was still probably a full four of top five players in their positions in the world. So like, it's not exactly a weakened side
No,
you're taking out.
that's why I caveated by weakened by saying you can't say weak because obviously it was what Ethan Fisher, Tyler Reeve, then Kelso, Dan McLellan. That is the starting four from pretty much every other country.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll get on to those four in just a second. I kind of want to go back. Charlie, we were pretty much back and forth texting throughout the entire weekend, discussing tactics, performances, players from the tournament. From your perspective, what did you make of England's approach and who stood out across the home nations?
I think, first of all, I have to say, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I love watching John, Chris, Marcus, and Ed. They are absolute artists in their craft. But to see this sort of fresh, younger England, vibrant side playing against the home nations, I think it not only filled me with joy, but it actually filled those sort of more senior players with joy as well. Like I know I was texting JB during it and spoke to JB about it, and he was enjoying watching it just as much as we were, Ryan. I think it was a really great weekend of football. There's a few talking points, and I'll work my way through them. And then, if any of you have anything that you want to say on them, feel free to jump in and cut me off. I think, first of all, I'll go kind of chronologically. We started off, and England were playing well. The individual quality was on show. Set pieces were still on point, which is something that we seem to have really mastered now. Dylan Kelsel's set piece delivery across the weekend was ridiculous, like so good.
Just on that, and because that is one of my talking points, and I just want to just butt in. Is there anyone in that squad or in the country with better dead ball delivery than Dylan Kelsall at the moment?
To be honest, it's not something that I'd like particularly. Like, I knew he'd obviously be good at it because he's a top level winger with great ball contact. But before the Largs weekend, it's not something that I necessarily associated with him as a sort of greater thing in his arsenal than the average sort of England player. But yeah, it was some of the most impressive and consistently powerful deliveries I've seen in a very long time. It was excellent from Dylan Kelsall, and yeah, the power that he generated, the accuracy, the ability to just miss the front bumper of the dummy of the middle man, or to just kiss that front bumper at the exact right angle every time, pretty much was absolutely amazing to see. And yeah, it's a great strength to have in England's arsenal. It was incredibly impressive. And that was one of the things that stood out to me on day one. There was some sloppiness defensively, obviously. We conceded in both games. Quite poor goals to concede, I'd say. And I think all that was sort of a mix of teething issues between Tyler and Ethan, sort of getting that communication going. It was the most they've ever played together in a competitive environment against another nation for England. And you could tell that they were sort of growing into it. Um, and there were a few errors, but some of the football was lovely. You then get to the Scotland game, and it was that I really enjoyed that game because it was nice to see sort of, rather than that senior four being fielded, a half of two completely different sides. I thought the first half was probably the weaker half of the weekend. I think the players that played in that first half were frustrated, not because they didn't play, it just didn't quite click. And I don't think any of them hit their maximum levels, and I think they'd all admit that. I thought the second half was improved. Obviously, we scored like 4 or 5 goals more in the second half. I thought it was improved, but still not England's peak. But then the final was where it all sort of came together for England. And some of the football that was played in the final is some of the best I've ever seen. Like some of the wing play, the picking off, Ethan and Tyler consistently hitting that central channel. It was absolutely stunning. It was just beautiful. It was Tyler Reeves' best performance arguably ever in any shirt, but definitely in an England shirt. He was like just outrageous, and he carried that form on to the WFA Cup the next week as well, and was disgustingly good at that day as well. He was just excellent. The fact that he managed to get joint top goal scorer with Dan McLellan, he was the standout player of the tournament, 100%. He was just brilliant, and it just all seemed to click in that final for England. And honestly, sat there watching it, and Gregg, it was great. We had a camera angle literally where you were in frame for half of the England attacks, and you were an absolute picture to watch on the bench because you were just absolutely loving it. And the final was just genuinely so enjoyable, and I just watched the whole thing with a massive smile on my face and just thought, yeah, we're in safe hands here.
Just on Tyler, I recall texting you prior to the weekend kicking off, Charlie, to say Tyler needs a big weekend. He needs it. because the conclusion of the Premiership was so fresh in our minds, and by the kind of the world-class standards that he's consistently hit over the last 12, 18 months, he was well below that, as was the whole Teesside squad, which we can talk about when we could come on to the Cup, how they righted that wrong. But Tyler was sensational. Good is the biggest understatement. He was on another planet. And that poses some incredibly interesting questions of Adam McAvoy, Craig Peaty, and the wider England team ahead of Argentina, because it's not a question of if he will feature on the plane. It's a question of if he could potentially feature in a starting four. But I won't skip ahead. Something that I also want to touch on is Ethan Fisher, because in the last episode of the podcast, I spent a bit of time talking about how I thought Ethan Fisher is not a first pivot and goalkeeper. I cannot picture it. For me, he's the John Bolding replacement. He sits in the centre. He sits more advanced than whoever wears that goalkeeper shirt. But my word, did that weekend answer a lot of those questions. He is the heir to Chris Gordon's throne, isn't he? Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. That sorry about that. That distribution, that ability to sit deep. I think the reason that you were maybe drawn into comparing him to John Bolding and Ryan, and I didn't necessarily, I was sort of on the fence about what you said at the time. I didn't agree or disagree. Is I think as a character and as a profile of player, he is more likened to John. Chris is very unique in terms of temperament, style, even just the way he looks when he, spins. He has a very unique style, and Ethan is more similar and has molded his game more off John Bolding than Chris. But Ethan's distribution and his deep distribution and the power he can generate and accuracy on balls, not necessarily out to the wide players, front bumpering it, doing all the intricate stuff, but those balls in the channel that he just lasers into that sort of corridor of uncertainty, where in the final every single time one of the wingers, whether that be Dan McLellan, Dylan Kelsall, they were there every single time and met it with the front bumper across to the other, was just stunning to watch. And you're right, he is the heir to Chris Gordon's throne. He could still be a John Bolding, but I just think he's played in that role now for Leeds, that deep goalkeeper distribution. He obviously has a bit more involvement at Leeds than he did with England, but him and Tyler rotated really well. He seems to be getting his temperament under control. I think he's had a bit of a sort of wake up call about how the maybe the community responded to the yellow card thing and stuff, and I don't want to keep dragging it up, and this will probably be the last time I ever mention it, but I think he saw that the community sort of frowned upon that and thought it didn't make him look great, and I think he's really responded to that, and we've seen a much more mature him. One of the other things was just generally, before we throw to Gregg to get sort of his sort of ear to the ground view on it, I thought the vibe on the pitch looked incredible. Like, the young players looked to be constantly communicating. It looked to be such an even, balanced dynamic out there. Such a positive, when there was a good passage of play, all you could hear was encouragement, one from the sidelines, and then you'd look on the court and you'd see, the players. What do you call that thing where you celebrate a goal? Like chair bumping with each other, like constantly throughout the games, and really appreciating each other for the work that they were putting in. And yeah, it was a fantastic culmination of the weekend. And I completely agree. Tyler and Ethan were superb, and all competition is healthy competition. And we'll see. I assume the plan will be to give them some minutes, both in a double pivot together. Maybe Tyler and Chris, John and Ethan, against some of the top teams, against Belgium and against France and against Italy in Largs, and then we'll see how it goes, and we'll see how it works with them not together. But yeah, I thought it was incredible, and I thought they both showed what they're made of massively.
And that's why it was probably the biggest positive from the weekend was Ethan's performances, because we know how good Tyler can be when he gets his football going. Dan and Dylan, likewise, world-class wingers. Their position isn't in question at all. But there was some question marks over Ethan, mainly because we've never seen him in an England shirt, really. Featured very sporadically, if at all, at the EPFA Nations Cup at the back end of last year. And yeah, incredibly encouraged. You spoke about the vibes on the court. I think from what I've seen posted online and speaking to Gregg, they are vibes that were very much shared off the court as well. The camaraderie, the togetherness, it did look incredible, and it translated even over stream. Gregg, give us your, as Charlie puts it, ear to the ground point of view. How good was that group together?
Yeah, I've got a few points to cover here, haven't I? It was a brilliant weekend, as I said. The vibes were definitely matched off the court. We all know each other. We're all really good friends. Just having that group, there's like what 7, 10 years between everyone in the group, seen all eight. Um, it was a really good laugh. We all had a brilliant time. Just we know when to take it seriously. We know when to switch on. But we could easily just afterwards or in the change room beforehand, just switch off, relax, have a laugh, make sure that we're all enjoying ourselves, and everyone I think had a brilliant time. I did, as you said, Charlie, I had the best seat in the house for most of the action, and it was a joy to watch at times. Um, not to toot his on too much because he's obviously my teammate and don't call bias. Tyler was unreal, especially in that final. It was a Tyler Reeve show for me. It was superb, just superb to watch, absolutely exceptional, and just showed the level he could produce, which was obviously never in doubt. But it just reminded everyone, I think, of how metronomic he was for the squad, especially in that final. Everything went through him, and like I said, I think because it got to it was like the 3.5 hour mark, Ryan, when you dropped the John is Ethan is the crown to John, the pretender to John's, the successor to John's crown. And I was like, I probably disagree with that, but at this point, we've been talking for 3.5 hours, and I can't form words anymore. Um, but I think like you said, Charlie, he has the ability to generate so much power from deep, and the accuracy is incredible. Just putting it in that corridor of uncertainty, as you say, for the wingers to come in and front bump pick off is ridiculous. He does it every single time, and those two together, I think they showed, because like you said, they didn't get a lot of time, if any, in Italy really to show it. It showed the combinations they can produce, rotating really well. They complement each other really well. Both really strong on the dribble. So even if you think, well, we can't let them pass it, we're going to try and close them down and dribble with them. Good luck, because they are two of the most difficult players to get the ball off. So it was just really good to be involved with, to share the court with these players that we've been trained together in the development squad. Ethan and Tyler were in there now; they're in the seniors. Same with Dylan. The vibes were really good. We all took to heart the messages Adam was saying about wanting to match the standards. We rose to the occasion when it wasn't going well. Everyone played with everyone. We rotated. We were all trying to get, our first goals. We were trying to get Ollie a goal. Matt Gilbert got his first senior goals, which was fantastic to see. Dan Rigby got a hat trick against Scotland. There was loads of milestones and occasions we could mark, and it just felt like we all came together and just thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. Even when I know on the Saturday night we did a mixed friendly. We mixed teams up with Scotland, and we did like 3 teams of 4, and put the music on in the hall and had a great time just kicking it about and able to relax and distress. So the future of English parish football is incredibly bright.
Yeah, I think that's an understatement. And just back on the Ethan point to conclude, it was after episode 55. I think a few people reached out to message me about that point of me comparing Ethan to John as opposed to Chris, one of which was England coach Adam McAvoy. And I think he pretty much repeated what you just said, Charlie, how Stylistically, he's very similar to John, but tactically and how his brain works, he is more akin to Chris, and that showed at the weekend. I think having watched that competition, I believe the 8 that Adam took to Italy will almost certainly be the 8 he takes to Argentina. That could be changed. That could be changed with the friendly tournament they've got scheduled for July, where I have no doubt some of these players that featured, yourself included, Gregg, will have an opportunity to throw a spanner at the works at the last second. But I personally believe the 8 that he took to Italy will be the 8 he takes to Argentina with a bit more experimentation, and he will take more risks with his lineup. But you can chip in a second and feel free to disagree with me. But I will say I love the refresh, the new faces, the buzz and the vibe around the squad that we're talking about. But I do still think there is a little bit of a gap between the current cohort or the 8 and some of the players that we saw trialled. That's only my opinion, and it's a relative gap. Take Ollie Crawshaw, for instance. I have been calling for his inclusion in the England senior squad for some time now, and I thought he was fantastic, but I think there is still a level. And we saw that when the core 4 of that Home Nations squad featured and some of the fringe players. If that is the case, and you can chip away at whatever part of this segment you want, if that is the case and they are the 8 that go to Argentina, are we now seeing kind of a level playing field within that England squad where no one is a guaranteed starter?
Firstly, I agree, and I've been saying this has been my opinion since Italy almost. I said I think the 8 that went to Italy will be the 8 that go to Argentina. For me, it makes sense. It just makes sense. You've got back-to-back tournaments within a year, pretty much. You just want to, and I get that the point of the development squad is to have a seamless transition to anyone in that squad could be called up if they wanted to. But you've been working on stuff for Italy, and you've only got what 6, maybe 7 or 8 camps between Italy and Argentina. It's only a 12-month period. You want that momentum. You want to be able to build stuff and build, the connection still. So I've said categorically to everyone that I've said this to Craig even, that I think that the 8 that went to Italy will be the 8 that goes to Argentina. But I also agree that there is such a small gap now between what you consider that core starting 4 for England seniors, those that have been there for decades, and those that are pushing through now. The gap is the smallest it has ever been with an England senior side, so that when you see England making subs now, it's not a few. We've got some sort of relief, and that's no disrespect to any of the squads that have been before, but there has been more of a level. There's no sort of, we've got maybe a little bit of a respite. You're thinking, blimey, okay, this is a different angle. This is a different rotation. It's a different option now rather than a sort of a starting 4 and a supplementary 4, if you know what I mean.
If I'm lining up England for a competitive game in the World Cup, I'm starting Dylan and Dan on the wings, no question. And some may call for Ed, some may want the work of Marcus, but I start with Dylan and Dan on the wings. The question then comes, and I think England's success or lack of success at the recent Euros was more determined by the double pivot and how at times it didn't quite work between John and Chris. I think their positions are the ones we need to focus on. Will Adam look to pair Ethan with John? Will he look to pair Tyler with Chris? That is what I'm fascinated to see. But I do think Adam could go with any starting 4 in Argentina. I wouldn't be too shocked.
Sorry, Charlie, can we just talk about how crazy that is as a statement to go, like, will we see the partnership? Like, that is, you put down a partnership in world football, maybe Momo and Brian, but they've never played as a 1 and 2 other than Italy. That is the partnership for the last 20 years nearly in Powerchair football for England. And we're saying, could it be time to split it up? That's wow. And that's credit to the level in this country and China and Ethan to say, well, it could be time to split John and Chris up. And I hope that they take that, and I know they will, they take that as a challenge to go, no, we are still the partnership. We want to be the ones that lead this country to a World Cup win because we've been trying for so long. We are still the benchmark.
Yeah, I think the what is going to be interesting to see as well is how tournament pressure affects people. I think Ethan and Tyler, compared to all of the others, have just not been exposed to anywhere near the amount of tournament pressure. Like the EPFA Nations Cup we mentioned, it's a great environment. It's a good place to play some competitive football. But there's no real atmosphere. There's very little pressure. It's the lights are not shining brightest. I think when you look at the other six in the squad, they're all sort of equipped for that. Like this will be Dan's second World Cup. He's been to a Euros, won a Champions League. Dylan, it's his second major international tournament, but he featured a lot of the Euros. Came on in the semi-final in extra time. I think he is sort of ready. It's just those other two that I don't necessarily worry for them. I have no concerns that they'll be able to adapt to the pressure. And we saw Tyler adapt to the pressure of a title race and win the league last season. Ethan did it this season. They're both going to be playing in front of TNT Sport cameras in a couple of weeks for the FA Disability Cup. So they've all got that within them, but it will just be. I don't think there's any player. My personal view is that there's no player in world football better equipped for a final than John Balding. I think the competition, the sort of mindset and the aura that he has going into any sort of big knockout game is just means that and even if he doesn't necessarily perform technically to his best within that game, you'd say the Euros final wasn't his game. I think there's always going to be posed a question of, do you go with the tried and tested? I think the wingers is slightly different because we always see sort of, and I was disappointed that Maka reverted back to that sort of type four for the Euros final starting four because I don't think they were the most informed players at the time, and I don't think that was the right team to pick. And we always see, that they're the four to pick because they've played in finals, and yes, they have. That has been England's go-to for playing in finals for quite a while. But it's also been England's go-to for losing finals for a little while too. In terms of we've only really seen one of those finals actually be successful. So you are right. I think going into this World Cup, there's no real credit in the bank for anyone. I think it is very much a level playing field, and it is going to be who performs in July. And then because it's such a long round robin tournament and every game is so competitive, there's no sort of gimme teams now in this World Cup at all. Every game is going to be so tough. You even look at like the teams that are going to be, Italy and Belgium are going to be like seventh and eighth favourites probably for the tournament, for example, and they are sides that pose real questions to England at the Euros. So there are no easy games. Every game's going to have crazy amounts of pressure on it. But I think every player now goes in. You mentioned the fact that the gap is smaller. I don't think there is a gap anymore. I think every player goes into this World Cup on a complete level surface, and whoever plays the best in that week that ends up going out to represent England in the final, for example.
Yeah, I do want to just go back to my statement about we could see any starting four and I wouldn't be shocked. That's more so in a group game than it would be a potential final when you have to consider these other factors that you just mentioned, Charlie. Pressure being a big one, and you wouldn't have seen it, but I was nodding my head when you alluded to the TNT cameras shining brightly on the likes of Ethan and Tyler at the FA Disability Cup weekend. I'm going to be watching them like a hawk because that is going to be a pressure like they've never played within before. On television, in front of a roaring crowd, and that is more akin to a international competition, to a Euros, to a World Cup than anything other at club level. So yeah, I'm fascinated to see how that one plays out. And I love the fact that there is no gap now because for years it was widely considered you had the core four and then you had a fringe four. That is not the case anymore at all.
Before we move on, uh, I I know John. Don't get me wrong. John is obviously the poster, but I think for me, if I'm picking anyone in a final, and just someone that like just loves, you know, finals and knockout football and establishes that, it's Marcus Harrison for me. And I get for I think I just know for me, I would I can you can see your faces shaking their heads. For me, I just think he loves a final. I think he loves knockout football. It suits his style. And yes, possibly in Italy for the Euros, it was disappointing. But I think back to Disability Cup final where and I get that the time was expired, and he's done me John on the line. He's had a wink at the TNT cameras. I go back to the Euros 7 years ago. That was
You're
he
going back a
scored.
long time now.
No, but this was a cup final to like what a year ago, 2 years ago. Where he had a wink at the camera.
23, 24.
23, 24 was that long ago.
Yeah, because it's the one I'm referring. I think you're referring to the one where Valentino was over.
Was Valentino
That's the
over?
last one that
Mad,
West
yes.
Brom won.
Yeah, crikey. But I think for me, it's still. Don't get me wrong. You can go and like John does love a final. He does have the aura, and
Can I,
he is a captain.
just on that Marcus point, if Marcus was still lining up for a really competitive West Bromwich Albion team, I would be inclined to agree. But I don't think the version we've seen of him at Greenbank is conducive or compatible with England. He's still a very important part of the squad, but I wouldn't play him in a starting final squad.
I could hear that point. I can hear that point definitely.
And it's a conversation and a debate we've had a lot on this podcast about Jacob Book-Platt. If he is to progress through the England pathway, where does he fit in? The same can be applied to Marcus now because he plays such a hybrid role, and any time within the game, he could be playing in any one of the four positions. And it's a gripe I've had against Teesside for a long time. Teesside don't play a version of football that betters you in a potential England shirt. So you're almost starting from scratch every time you adorn the three lions. So if clubs do have an objective, a priority, a dream to see some of their players go on to represent England, Newcastle and Ollie Crawshaw could be another example, they have to start introducing elements of the England way into their club football. Otherwise, their players just won't settle in those very short time periods.
Yeah, and it's a valid point, and one that we've had discussions about how the only time I play for it is when I go to England camps every now and again. So yeah, discussions have been had, but hey, if we keep winning stuff, I can't complain. Shall we talk about the cup?
Let's do it.
Yeah, so let's now on to Bring the Noise at Derby Arena, the biggest domestic event in the Powerchair football calendar. As alluded to, expanded for 2026. We had 10 matches across the day, 2 national trophies decided. It was a record attendance, I think 350 plus, which was fantastic. Before we go on to all the football, how do we both find the day?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. Competitive, intense. I literally, and I kid you not, I slept for 16 hours that Saturday night after the cup final day. I got home to my Unicom, went to bed at like 7 o'clock at night, and woke up at 11 o'clock the next morning. So I was shattered after it. Can only imagine how the players and people like yourself, Ryan, um, sort of viewed it. One of the main things that I said to players during the day, when they were moaning about stuff, which players can moan sometimes, is I just said, you guys have no idea how much work goes into your sport, and I had the privilege of being able to go on the Friday night and help. Well, I say help, give minor assistance to Jeff Lewis mainly in setting up at Derby Arena, and we were there from like what 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock until gone 10 o'clock at night setting up, and was a good team that were working their absolute socks off. And yeah, I don't think the players necessarily appreciate how much effort goes into the sport, because seeing all that set up and then coming back the next morning and seeing people using the setup that was used, and people, you know, even having the audacity to maybe say, "Oh, why haven't you done it this way?" When you see the amount of thought that goes into it, and you see the amount of effort that goes into organising days like that, which I did get to see, um, it was really nice to see it play out. In terms of the structure of the day, I think having the final on that day works. I would like to maybe see some revisions to it, which I guess will be a section of this where we talk about changes that we would do. There are some revisions that I would like to see that I think would be workable and that would improve the day drastically, actually, for next year. But overall, in terms of it being the first year where we host the final, um, it was a bit of a shame that the final played out in the way it did. Not because I didn't want Teesside to win. I loved that Teesside won, and I was incredibly happy for Newcastle getting to the final. It being an absolute walloping, really. There's no other way to say it. Where Teesside scored after 90 seconds and then just completely dominated, wasn't conducive to creating that sort of final atmosphere, and it didn't necessarily feel like a final after like 20 minutes. It felt a little bit sort of National League, which, listen, it's cup football. Teams, there are upsets sometimes, and then sometimes the team that upsets the odds, the final was obviously just one too many games for Newcastle in that instance, and they did an incredible job to even get there. And if you'd said to them at the beginning of the day, "Oh yeah, you're going to be playing Teesside in a final later," I'm sure they would have been like, "Wow, that's incredible," and they would have taken that. So yeah, I think it was a shame that the final wasn't a little bit more of a spectacle in terms of the football was brilliant, but a close competitive game that went right down to the wire, because I think that would have generated more of an atmosphere and a buzz around it potentially. But overall, in terms of the day, I thought it was good. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, as you alluded to, once we've recapped all of the football, we will talk about potential revisions we could make for 2027. One of which I think we have to break up the football more and potentially do it across 2 days, because I think we saw Newcastle just completely run out of steam towards the end, and a fresh firing version of Newcastle, with all due respect to Teesside, don't lose 5-0. I'm not saying they win it. I'm not saying they narrow that gap, but it's more competitive. Gregg, just the overarching feelings around the day, the sense of occasion, because something we tried to do for 2026, and I'm not saying we absolutely nailed it, but we certainly made strides from 2025, is making it feel like a real event. And I think we did that.
Yeah, I think it was the sense of having two competitions on the same day, having a final. There was lots more people there. There was lots more interest, loads more games to be played, obviously. Um, and getting obviously having more teams there means more people turn up. So there's a nice crowd in, which is always nice to play in front of. I echo Charlie's point, the fact it didn't feel like a cup final, and I get that that is partly to do with the fact that it was so one-sided at one point. Um, towards the end, I think everyone was running out of steam. Just we've been up since I think we were on first game at 9:30, and then by the time we got to 4 o'clock, or everyone was tired. Parents, carers, friends, family, players, chairs were dead. Like my chair went in the final. Tyler's was gone from about half time. It was going in the Aspire semi-final. So how he made it through the final, I do not know. Newcastle's chairs were going. I mean, Ollie swapped Aaron Guthrie's batteries into his chair just to make sure he could get through the final. So we'll get onto that at some point. So yeah, it didn't feel necessarily like a cup final, um, which is um, something I think to think about next year. I suppose the one I not benefit, but is that the 5-0 wasn't on TNT going out as that sort of package, because that doesn't look great for the sport if you're putting a 5-0 thrashing on national television. I get that those results happen, and obviously it's no disrespect to Newcastle because they were superb the day to make it to the final themselves. And yes, I'd be disappointed with how the final went, but I think if they look back at it, they can go take some real pride in the fact that They made it past West Brom on penalties and dug deep and defended really well. So, as a spectacle, the final wasn't great, but the day itself, lots of great stories. Derby has that sort of more of an arena feel. It's called the Derby Arena for a reason. Um, and we're trying to get to that point where it's becomes sort of our version of Wembley, aren't we? At this point for a cup final, we're trying to make it that sort of special venue, that special occasion, and we're making steps to get to that point because, like Charlie says, a lot of hard work went from a lot of people. A lot that late night on the Friday, Jeff came into our hotel on the Friday night at 10 o'clock, and he still had to sit in reception and pump up the footballs, which went down really well with the locals trying to eat their dinner. I tell you that, it was quite funny. But a lot of hard work from a lot of people, you two in particular, um, goes into making it what it is, and I don't think that can be forgotten.
And just on that point, even more important to acknowledge the fact that it's all supported by volunteers giving up their own time and effort. And that's what makes it even more impressive. So if you do have a gripe, you do have a frustration, just know that these are people dedicating their own time to supporting and propping up this sport and this competition. So it is fantastic. But I think the overarching thing that I'm getting from your initial thoughts is something we have to consider for 27 is moving to quality over quantity, because I don't think they work in tandem when it's this intense. And I don't necessarily disagree that a 5-0 thrashing on TNT is a bad thing for the sport. I'd much rather that than what we have had for many years is those stubborn stalemates decided by one breakaway goal, two defensive outfits not wanting to risk anything. And that's something I would much rather see is free-flowing attacking football, seeing the football at the very best, even if there is a disparity between the opponents.
Yeah, and I think first of all, I actually don't think Newcastle roll over that easily at St George's Park. I just don't think it happens. I think they have basically then 6 weeks to come up with a complete new game plan for Teesside and train entirely to play against Teesside. The excitement and the adrenaline of winning a penalty shootout sort of dies down. Because I remember I went up to Ollie just before the final and I said to him, are you ready? And his response was he was literally still like red in the face, massive smile on his face, and he was like, I'm still buzzing from the semi-final. And I thought, I love that for you. Don't get me wrong. If I'd just beaten West Brom on penalties as a major underdog, I would be, going out and getting absolutely going out on the town in Derby and having a great time, straight to spoons after the game. But so don't get me wrong, I get that, but that I just don't think that happens for the St George's Park day because you then have okay, what an achievement it is to make it to St George's Park after the season we've had. What an incredible achievement! Right, now we actually are there. Let's put and that sort of thought process of getting yourself up for the final can play out over that period. So I don't think it would have gone down in the same way. I think the last two cup finals at St George's Park were perfect. I thought the 23-24 one with Marcus Valentino, that the cheeky wink, as Gregg already mentioned, from Marcus Valentino, the Argentinian flair. Aspire just coming off the back of winning the Champions League. I thought that was an incredible final. And I also thought last year's final was very good, actually. Aspire and West Brom really had a go at each other, really played attacking football. 2-1. I thought it was a really good final. And I think this year will be the same at St George's Park with Teesside and Leeds.
I think on the topic of West Brom and Aspire, when they have comprised the final, Chris and John have collectively come to a decision to play attacking football to be a better advert for the sport of powerchair football. And you would rather lose in a really thrilling final than win in a really mundane, boring final showdown. And that's something that I'm going to implore Teesside and Leeds to do on Sunday, June the 28th, even if it means risking a little bit of stability, some of that defensive shape, go for it because you're the two most attacking teams in the country. If that is a 0-0, I might hand in my resignation.
Yeah,
There is zero reason why you both shouldn't have the confidence, the ability, the player skill sets to absolutely throw everything at that game. And it could very easily be the best final we've ever had.
absolutely. It could be. And also, one of the things that taking sort of the cup final status away from it does, this is my sort of take on it. Let's not make that trophy a major trophy. Let's not start talking about trebles if you win the cup, the league and that community shield. I think it should carry about the same weight as the community shield in the running game in terms of it is a showcase match. And I do think, when you go out on that court at St George's Park, of course you want to win. Your family and friends are going to be there. You don't want them to see you lose. You don't want them to see you play poorly. And I recognise if Newcastle had got there that they probably would have to play a bit more of a defensive style because they wouldn't want to get absolutely, smashed on national TV. Nobody wants that. But there is also you do wear the burden of you actually have a responsibility to the community on that day to put on a good advert for the sport. You have a responsibility to the community to behave in a way that is acceptable. We don't want to see dirty tricks and players, trying to pull the wool over the referee's eyes and big arguments and people falling out. We want to see a nice, clean game. We want to see the sense of community out there on the court. And of course, we want it to look like elite sport because it is elite sport. And we want it to be as competitive as possible. We want people to be focused. But, if you end up being the player that they talk to on TNT, as much as you talk about your own team and your performance, you also talk about the wider community and the impact that the sport has on your life and on the lives of many. And it is really important. Luckily, we've been very sort of viral this year, Powerchair Football. We've been on TV quite a bit, and this will be the sort of next instalment of that in a World Cup year as well. And, I love, if Gregg ends up doing the interview after the game, for him to make a comment about, listen, yeah, what an incredible final. And guess what, people? Powerchair football doesn't stop for anybody, and this is what we've got on for the rest of the year. And there's a World Cup in October, and the England side are one of the best in the world. And, giving it all that. And I genuinely think, yeah, you are right, Ryan. This is the most exciting matchup of styles that we could have because it's a traditional 3-1 of Teesside, potentially even going to a 4-out versus the 4-out of Leeds. Young players, exciting talents, great personalities. It has all the hallmarks of an incredible final. And I just hope, yeah, that the shackles come off and it can be that game that we all know it can because yeah, I will also be I mean, I don't really have a resignation to hand in, but I'll write one anyway, and I'll write a very angry Facebook post if I see Gregg and Tyler sat on the line together for the entire game.
Completely that. And I didn't even really consider this incredible wave we're currently riding with the BBC feature, with the repair shop, even features on Pointless from Marcus and Luke. There is more awareness around the sport of power chair football now than there has ever been, let alone the fact that we're building to a World Cup. So this is the opportunity, and it's to be confirmed definitively, but I don't believe this year's FA Disability Cup is behind a paywall. So it is free to air for anyone, which uh, automatically probably trebles, quadruples the numbers at very least. So you do have a duty to the sport, and I've said it on this podcast so many times. That day alone does more for the sport of powerchair football in England than the other 364 combined because of that mainstream element, because of the spotlight shining on the sport. So no pressure, Gregg, but you have to go for it.
Yeah, and I think this is the debate within the sport going forward. I think for me, in the next couple of years, is what do we want? I said this just earlier. What do we want the pinnacle to be? As in, we've taken the cup final away from, St. George's and the TNT cameras, and we're trying to make Derby the sort of Wembley of our sport now. It seems, but obviously the pull of playing in front of TNT cameras still kind of at this point where we're still getting to trying to raise Derby up to that point, playing in front of TNT cameras. I think if you gave the players a choice now at the minute? Would you say, would you rather play in front of the TNT cameras at St George's Park for a Disability Cup final that's maybe more like a Community Shield, or would you rather play at Derby for a cup final that is the WFA, that is the cup, FI version of the FA Cup, but it's not on TNT? I think most would choose TNT and St George's. And that's not slighting Derby and the cup final. It's just the fact of the matter as it is, as it stands now. But it's that double-edged sword, isn't it? We do have a responsibility and duty to the sport to show it in the best light because we all want this sport to grow as much as it can and show how good it is. We want to put an attacking display on of the best that our sport can offer. I've sat and commentated on the last two at TNT, and I've said this live. I've said, like, all I want is a good game that showcases our sport in the best way. But at the same time, you don't want to get tonked on national television, and you want to still have that competitive nature and keep yourselves stable. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
I remember talking to Dylan Kelsall at last year's FA Disability Cup weekend, and he had not long joined Leeds, and he said, and I think it was the objective of Leeds as a club, that is what we want to achieve. We want to be present at the FA Disability Cup final at St George's Park, televised on TNT Sports. So yes, I do still agree that is the golden ticket, but I like how Charlie put it. Can we change the definition of that? It's now a showdown, a showcase. It is a Community Shield style equivalent rather than an like a WFA Cup. And there's many reasons as to why we have reformatted and restructured the competition, not least because the FA Disability Cup, as amazing as it is, doesn't give the WFA any opportunity to showcase themselves as an association because it's very much an FA-led event. And you would absolutely trade that for it being on television. Yeah, so that is still the absolute the pinnacle of our sport because of the eyes that will be watching.
But I think, while yes, it's the pinnacle for the players, in terms of the day they want to play in, I still think if we're ranking the trophies and we're ranking how prestigious something is to win, even though it takes place at TNT Sports, if you ask the players, would you rather win the league or the cup? They'll say the league because, and that has no massive spectacle around it at all. That's just because it's the most prestigious thing, and then above that, in a club sense, is the Champions League is the most prestigious thing you can win in club football. So I still think, regardless of what you do to individual matches and to make it more of a spectacle in terms of the finals, the ranking of how much a player actually wants to win a trophy is going to be the same regardless. I don't think there's ever a world where a player would rather win the cup than the league. And maybe that's just, me with sort of the elite running game mentality in my head. But I think, I speak to everyone at, Aspire and John and Dan and stuff. They would much rather win the league than the cup. And winning the cup does have a certain charm to it, but being the best team in the country over 22 games is just something that is never going to be beaten for me.
No, I completely agree. The league is the pinnacle in terms of sporting achievement and what a Powerchair football can win. That Premiership medal will sit highest. There's no question about that. I think the FA Disability Cup weekend probably can come with no medal, no trophy, and it would still feature fairly prominently in terms of the wish list. The cup, because we've restructured it, is going to take time to build that legacy, build that reputation. So this year's FA Disability Cup is the 10th anniversary. So the first one held at St George's Park was 2015-16. So there's going to be a lot of promotion around the 10-year story with regards to the 25-26 FA Disability Cup weekend. Give the WFA Cup at Derby the equivalent time. We are looking to expand. We are looking to get better. We are looking to hopefully add mainstream television coverage to that. Then it's a completely different conversation. But at the moment, the league is the pinnacle. Underneath that, because of the spotlight, I'd say it's the FA Disability Cup on TNT Sports. And below that is the cup. But because of this year being a ticketing year for next year's Champions Cup or Champions League equivalent for Powerchair football, maybe that answer changes slightly.
Yeah, see, I'm going to just completely go out there and say I actually don't get me wrong. Obviously, want to retain the title, want to go back to back. Um, Wanted to win it. Um, but to be honest, I was I hadn't won the cup, hadn't made a cup final, um, hadn't had a sniff of a chance of winning it. And the fact of ticketing year, um, I actually was. I think I was happier winning the cup this year than I would have been winning the league. But that's me. Genuine. That is purely personal opinion
And
because I hadn't won it before, and
yeah.
it's something new for me. Like I said, I would love to have done right. I'd have been over the moon if we'd have gone back to back, lost the cup, and gone back to back in the league. I would have done, but something new, ticketing year for the Champions League, which became more important when we didn't win the league. Um, that is purely just my personal opinion and how
Yeah.
and
No, I don't disagree with that because you're coming off the back of being reigning champions in the Premiership. You've tasted that, you know what it feels like. And this was the only thing kind of left for Teesside to achieve at club level in England. And you've done that. So, no, I don't disagree. It's fascinating. But it does go back to what I said earlier. And obviously, we've gone off on a tangent as this podcast is designed to do. I just want to see you go for it because everything we're talking about is this being a pinnacle, a showdown, a showcase. Make it that.
yeah, but I think going back to trying to rein it back into the actual day itself, because we've gone off on a tangent. We had a lot of questions to answer from the how the season had unfolded and how it ended, and we went off on a disappointing note. In the end, we came into um, the day itself probably second or third favourites because West Brom had much better form. Aspire had much better form. Um, Greenbank arguably had a better form, but we knew obviously that one of West Brom and Greenbank wasn't going to make it out of the quarterfinals. Um, and that was the drama in that game was arguably most drama the entire day. I've never put down a headset quicker in my life because I was doing Newcastle versus Middlesbrough on Court B, which um, wasn't quite as much of a spectacle. But as soon as we wrapped up, I threw my headset down and went and ran over to the other court because I then saw the penalties in that one. But it was we had a lot of questions to answer, and I think we answered not all of them, but a fair amount of them, and showed what we are about.
We can get onto individual players in just a second, but at the moment I want to focus on Tyler. Do we feel that the scheduling of the home nations leading straight into Derby Day pretty much won Teesside the Cup because Tyler was bringing the most inspired home nations form into the cup competition. And not only was he the standout in Largs, he was the clear standout, maybe alongside Ed uh, at Derby. He was sensational.
Yeah, I think it was a massive influence. I think um had Tyler had a poor weekend and maybe some more question marks have been raised about his chances of being selected for Argentina and stuff, and that was all in his head. I think he would have been a different player at Derby, but the fact that he had so much momentum, when he arrived in the morning at Derby, the amount of people that I saw, including myself, who went up to him and was just like, because it was the first time they'd seen him since Largs, and just said, Tyler, man, like, that was incredible. What an incredible weekend you had. Congratulations. That would have just given him a boost. Tyler's a massive confidence player. Most players, actually, most sports people are confidence players. Confidence is a real tool when it's channeled correctly, and Tyler channels his confidence in the perfect way. I think had he had gone into it with less confidence, would Teesside had been as comfortable? Maybe not. But yeah, I think his momentum going into that day gave the entire Teesside squad a lift, which was really needed. Because I think, let's say, had it been game week 5 of the Premiership the week before the cup, I think the vibes around the entire Teesside squad would have been very different. But because they had that time to reset, they had that time, and they had Tyler in such good form, he was just unstoppable at Derby. And yeah, we can transition to talk a bit more about the footballing side now. But he played at a very high level. And one thing I would maybe like is an MVP of the Cup day. And I think he would have been the MVP of the Cup as well.
Yeah, in hindsight, I wish I did something more around kind of a team of the weekend or team of the competition or finals day more specifically. Tyler would have most certainly featured, as would have Ed, because Ed was just incredible. Um, in the final, which was the largest margin ever in the final showdown, 5-0. Ed scored his 400th career club goal, which is just ridiculous. Talk to me about their performances, Greg, and then we will, of course, come on to your assist. Don't worry.
Thanks, Ryan. Um, yeah, I disagree with the whole. If Largs had been before the Largs before giving us, don't get me wrong, it gave Tyler a massive boost, and he did take confidence from that massively. I don't know what it was about the day. I just think we just clicked a lot. We'd switched up a little bit. We'd taken advice about goal kicks. I've started taking goal like Alan and I were taking goal kicks, and we were trying to push forward and be a bit more aggressive. I don't want to. I think it's a valid point to make about confidence and being confident players, and it did give Tyler a boost. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's doing a slight disservice to the rest of the squad to suggest that we possibly wouldn't have won it without if it had been the other way. If game week 5 just been beforehand, that's I go on. You have a right to rebuttal. Go on.
Powerchair football is typically always dictated by the proficiency and the success of the central player. Teesside's success as a whole, winning the Premiership, winning the Cup, Tyler has played a central role in that. And you could say that without Ethan, Leeds don't win the Premiership. So I have to disagree with your disagreement. The home nations and the scheduling of it going straight into Derby. And this isn't doing your other players a disservice because they all played an incredible role, but it was all facilitated by Tyler, as it is for any other team in the centre. And I thought he was absolutely sensational. And I would go as far as to say that Tyler won you the cup.
Yeah, I would agree. I have to say, not only do I think it was a factor, I think it was but Tyler's confidence was the biggest factor of Teesside winning the cup because yes, okay, Seven Oaks, they got through in the quarterfinals. We all knew that they'd get through quite comfortably. I think in the Aspire game, it was very. I know you said you made some tactical adjustments, and it worked for the first half. But then I thought second half, Teesside were absolutely pinned in, and for most of extra time as well. And I think it was very similar to sort of the game week 5 clash between the two. And I think Tyler's confidence then in the penalties and in convincingly burying his penalties was a massive factor, obviously, as with the rest of players that scored theirs. I just don't think, yeah, I think without that momentum of Tyler and without the sort of bit between his teeth and the freedom that he played with, I don't think he would have been as successful. Would you have still won the cup? Maybe. I wouldn't say Tyler won you the cup. I think that's a step too far because penalties are a lottery, and the Aspire Teesside game was just so cagey once again that there was a chance. But would you have won it in sort of the roaring fashion that you did in the final without that sort of extra swagger and confidence that Tyler had? I'm not so sure it would have been as dominant of a performance without that.
Yeah, no, I take that, and Tyler is obviously um metronomic to us as a squad because he is our middle player. That is no bones about it. That is obvious, and the success of a power football team does come through the middle player. And my disagreement was with the Lars comment, and he is a confidence player, and he is our exceptional middle player, and he does lift us. I just think we'd made some slight adjustments which had given Tyler some confidence anyway, in the fact that we were trying to be a little bit brave. And yes, we didn't completely play like 3.5, 4 out yet in the Aspire game. The first half we were dominant, completely dominant. Second half and extra time we were pinned in. It was a complete flip. Um, but we all buried our penalties. Um, there were no real issues with the penalties. I know a few of them were saying first time around, but that's just because Dan was jumping, which you have to do. So I think you have to as a goalkeeper, and I didn't do enough of. I was trying to time me moving my joystick with the player hitting the ball, but what I didn't factor in was the fact that there's a latency between me moving my joystick and the chair actually moving. So it looks like I'm being slow. So that's something I've got to work on for future years. But I think, yeah, we all buried the penalties. Would the final have been so one-sided? I think there's more factors to it than Tyler's confidence. Obviously, we've mentioned chairs dying and players being fatigued, etc., etc. So possibly not. But yeah, Tyler was in imperious form, and obviously was our standout player and would have absolutely won MVP of the day, no matter what. I just think there's more to it than simply Largs being the weekend before.
Yeah, I get that point. Obviously, we look at that scoreline in the final and seeing it as dominant as it is. But to your point, there's so much context that needs to be layered in about the chair-related issues, the fatigue, etc. Beyond that, I don't think we saw the very best of Powerchair football. The quality wasn't necessarily there, and that's something that needs addressing for 27.
Need to talc the balls. Need to put some talc. Need to put some talc. This is one that I have no issue with saying this on the podcast. The court at Derby is slow for a patch football. I will say this now, that it is so difficult to generate power, and
Yeah,
that hinders the ability and the quality of the play massively.
that kind of answers my next point, because something I was a little bit underwhelmed by was the lack of bravery and width of teams. So unlike Nottingham, we used full regulation courts, so 30 meters by 18 meters. And I thought when Charlie was setting up the courts on Friday night, I thought, oh, this is exciting. We're going to see some really expansive, fast football, but it just didn't really happen. And if you was to look at all of the games and break it down and get the Opta stats, I would say that 60-70% of possession in every single one of the games would have been in a central corridor and not out wide.
Yeah, I think Greg, I think the court is the surface is the main culprit for that. Greg, you remember, just as a point of reference for people to go and watch what we're talking about. Remember the chance that Aspire had late on, like 36th minute, Dan's full spun it onto the front bumper of John Dixon, and he's met it front bumper, and it's like it was a big chance for Aspire with like 4 minutes to go. I think on a Nottingham court, that front bumper just gets absolutely smashed between you and Tyler because of the power Like it was a full spin from Dan straight onto the front bumper. He just absolutely kills it into the goal, and the ball, as it's gone in towards John Dixon, has just died a death on the court. And then it's met John Dixon's front bumper, and then again it had a bit of air on it. It's died another death, and it's just about. Tyler saves the first one. He then gets another front bumper on it. It comes off the post and then gets wedged between the post and the back of your chair. And I think at Nottingham, that's a goal every single game. And we saw it, didn't we, Ryan, at the Club World Cup where they were swapping the balls every 10 minutes and talking the balls. And I think that's almost an identical surface at Prison Bobigny to the one at Derby Arena. And that did, while it was still a bit slow, some of the football, that did help a lot, talking the balls and making it a bit slicker. Obviously, it's harder to manage. They needed like basically a fifth official and a fourth official to be doing that consistently. So we're going to need a bigger officiating team because there was a limited officiating team at Derby on Saturday for various reasons. I was disappointed I'm not afraid to say this, that we didn't see many of our, top officials, World Cup going officials at Derby Arena for the WFA Cup Finals day. You know, not great. I'm not gonna lie. But I guess life gets in the way. I would say, we need a bigger officiating team to make that happen, but it has to happen because yeah, it's not a good surface for quick passing football, and it did result in the ball getting locked up a lot in the dribble because teams knew that just they wouldn't be able to generate the power coming out wide, and it resulted in a lot of kick-ins as well. Because wingers were getting the ball and they just weren't being able to find the gap, weren't being able to get the power, and it was just bouncing off a central player and going out for a kick in. And then because the court was so wide, kick-ins, then the dynamic of kick-ins changed as well then because you sort of couldn't stick it on a defense as easily because of how big the court was. So they weren't actually as advantageous a position as they would be on a smaller court. So yeah, I think talking the balls would be very beneficial. I like the fact that we had literally, like, we measured the courts on the Friday night and it was literally on the limit, like pretty much the to the sort of millimeter about the biggest legal power chair football court you're allowed to have. And that I agree, I thought that would be better, but actually I think it had the adverse effect because the ball took longer. Obviously the passing lanes were longer, and with the ball sort of slowing down on that surface, it sort of took the pace out of the game and let defenses adjust so much quicker.
I think the biggest victims of that were the Vars teams. And you only really got a sense for how quick and powerful the Premiership teams are when you watch them in consecutive games with Championship opposition. So on commentary, I'm going from a quarter final or a semi final in the Cup to a semi final or a final in the Vars. And I couldn't put it down to a lack of quality, but it wasn't. It was kind of a lack of power and speed, which the second tier clubs can't generate in comparison with the top tier. Layer in the fact that the surface isn't conducive for quick quality football, it does make sense. So talking the balls is a non-negotiable if we are to return to Derby for 27. How does it compare with St George's Park, Greg, the surface?
Kind of got me thinking now. It's similar, but yeah, we knew immediately that within 5, 10 minutes of Sevenoaks game, we're just like you cannot generate any power back from wingers as a winger in that game going back to middle player. It was ridiculously difficult to try and give the middle player any time on the ball to play their pass when the pass you're playing is dying getting there, which is why a lot of the play in the middle was dominant because you couldn't go out wide because the ball was never going to get to you. So the fact we managed to score, sorry, like eight goals in a day was pretty like surprising because you could really not move the fences around as much because the ball wasn't flying around as much. Um, and I suppose we'll see at St George's. It's not the same as Nottingham, but it's like a middle ground between the two. I think it's like not as bad as Derby, but maybe not as slick as NTU. But yeah, that's got to be something that changes for the years going forward if we want to get mainstream TV footage on our cup final, as we should. Obviously, we can't be having it look so slow. It didn't feel right as a player, which I think then led to that being one-sided. Why the final didn't feel as much of that as a cup final as it possibly should have done. But obviously, this is the second year we've only been there.
Yeah, my understanding of it from someone who's still not played on it, but has obviously been to both venues and spoken to people that have played at both places, is there's a different challenge of St George's Park, which is actually not to do with the ball, but it's quite a sticky court there, as I understand, for actually the players' tires rather than the movement of the ball. So the ball, it's quite like obviously the ball and the surface are not bad because the ball's not going to stick to the ground. So the ball moves quite quickly at St George's, and actually sometimes the ball can move a bit too quickly for the players at St George's Park, I think, because that's quite a sticky surface, and so the tires of the chair, the turning on it is not as crisp. Nottingham Trent University is is such a good court, isn't it? Like in terms of the surface for the players to play on, it is such like the ball just moves so well, and the chairs just move so well on it. Maybe it's just because it's had wheelchair football played on it 10 weekends a year for years. It's become maybe we've conditioned the surface to be so good. I don't know, but um, yeah, there definitely is something to that, and yeah, it's not something that I massively considered on the day, but I definitely felt like I was watching it and thinking, yeah, it didn't look like, half speed, but it looked like we were watching Powerchair football with maybe like 0.75, 0.8 times speed that we'd usually see it right at the top of the game.
Hey, if you want a non-sticky court, our training venue, when they polish the floor, it's like dancing on ice.
Talk to me about the final then. We've taken obviously all the factors into consideration, but Teesside were just a level above, playing some of the most silky, free-flowing football we've seen across the day, across the competition, and deserving champions, I must say.
Um, Sorry, Charlie, I'm just assuming I was meant to be jumping in there. Um, yeah, we had momentum. Obviously, we'd just beaten Aspire on penalties, and as a goalkeeper, winning on pens, making the save to win a penalty shootout, that gives you a rush. I mean, it may have looked like I was taking the mick a little bit when I was moving my hands around to try and attempt to put the players off. But that was me keeping myself calm. But so getting saving a penalty and winning the cup, winning the semi-finals gives you a confidence boost, and all the players were on a high. And then we got the goal within 90 seconds, which kind of gave us a room to breathe. But we did switch off for about the next 15 minutes of the first half. We dropped off. We got the one goal, and it was like, oh, can we kick on and go for it? Newcastle came at us and penned us in a little bit and made it a little bit more cagey than we thought it would be after going 1-0 up so early on. And that's credit to them and disappointing from us. We were told that at half time. Paul Person was saying, look, you switched off, switch back on. The game is there to be won. You've got the lead, yes, but you want to be able to put your mark on this game. In the second half, we were superb, and you could say Newcastle's chairs were dying, yes. I mean, our chairs, Tyler's chair was definitely going. Mine started again, but the football in the second half was sublime. It really was, and call me biased all you like. Um, we were excellent and thoroughly deserved the victory because it just, like I said, it just clicked. We answered some of the questions that were asked of us. We were braver with goal kicks and weren't getting penned in as much. Um, what was interesting actually was, actually, I don't know, that with, I'm just really switching off here. I've gone back from the final, but it's something thought that's gone in my head. Have Aspire said anything about why John didn't go and go for penalties and choosing
Yeah.
Dan to go in?
Yeah, yeah, basically, John got booked in the game, and he was on a yellow. And basically, if you're a goalkeeper in a penalty shootout, you're getting booked with the current rules. Did you get booked in the? You
No, I
managed.
didn't. I didn't jump. I didn't jump. What I only jumped once, and I didn't jump. So I didn't jump for any of the four. Possibly, I should have saved a couple of them, like no offense, John Dixon, but I feel like I should have saved his because it wasn't a great
Yeah,
penalty. I was disappointed with that one. So we went through the first four, and I didn't jump for any of them because I was being really conscious of it. Like I said, trying to time it. And you see, the one time I do jump was for Dan's first penalty, the second time around, and immediately you see me put my hand up and go, "Yep, by the way, I've jumped."
yeah,
Probably
yeah.
not great for me, but I'd wait for Pete Westmore's whistle. But it kind of worked because then obviously I saved Dan's second one. But yeah, you're gonna most likely be booked, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's not even that. So that, and this was another thing that wasn't massively helpful. Not that despite I didn't deserve to win on penalties, but the referees didn't actually really know the rules around it, and so had to go and find, which is why extra time was delayed for a little bit as well, is because so a booking in a penalty shootout for a goalkeeper is not counted as a second yellow card from the game. So he wouldn't have been sent off for getting booked in penalties. However, he would have been suspended for the final because of picking up 2 yellow cards. So even though they don't count as within the same game, they don't count as a second yellow. They count as 2 yellows, which would have then seen him suspended for the final. So because they didn't obviously want John Bowling to be suspended for the final had they got there, they decided to put Dan in goal, which he was not expecting and had not practiced for in any eventuality. But yeah, it was a bit of a strange one. Penalty, I mean, that's another thing. God, this is going to be a long episode because we still need to discuss that penalty law that caused a lot of debate again at Derby. But yeah, I think it was a bit of a weird shootout, to be honest. Like, the penalty shootouts in this sport are just so they're not nice to watch. Like, they're just like, I know I don't like penalties in any sport, but especially in Powerchair football, because of the amount of jeopardy and the amount of onus on referees, and the fact that, like, even though you say you didn't move early, Greg, like, you moved before the ball was struck on basically every penalty. You just didn't move early enough for it to be deemed as an early movement, if you know what I mean. Like, you still moved before the ball was officially struck. It just becomes a very difficult situation.
We're here now, so we may as well just unpack the penalty issue in a little bit more detail. It's not the ruling that I have issue with, it's the discrepancy in how it's adjudged by the officials. So if you go to the quarterfinals, West Bromwich Albion versus Greenbank, Marcus Harrison has a penalty beyond extra time to potentially put it back to 1-1. Chris is moving long before the ball is struck, but it's allowed. Play continues, full-time whistle is blown. A lot of outrage from Greenbank, and probably understandably so. Then you go to West Bromwich Albion's semi-final against Newcastle United. I don't think Chris jumps at all in comparison to the one against Marcus, and it's been made to be retaken. And by the standard set and the precedent set with that first one against Marcus, I don't think Dan moves. Was it your penalty, or was it who was
It's the one that went straight down the middle.
Yeah, Tyler.
Yeah,
Was it?
Tyler's, I think. Yeah.
I think that should have stood as a save.
Yeah, it's tough because, so for example, the Tyler one's the interesting one for me because does Dan move early? Yes. Like, he does move, his chair moves before the ball is struck. Where is it's right down the middle. So even if Dan had his hand off his controller and not even moved forward, the penalty, like, it would have just ricocheted straight off him. It was a poor penalty from Tyler, which I'm sure he'd admit. It's such a difficult rule. I think there were just some mistakes, like the second Greenbank penalty not being retaken. I think Jeff had already made Marcus retake it once, but Chris's movement for the second one is like some of the earliest movement I've ever seen. Like, he's moved before Marcus has even really like wound up to take a penalty, let alone actually struck. It was bad and should have been disallowed. And I think that one was just an error in officiating. But one of the things that I have been tempted to do is just like, if you can put stuff on at 0 0.1 times speed and actually look at every penalty across Derby, how early a goalkeeper, all the penalties that were saved, how early the keeper moved in like nanoseconds, and work out whether that was like whether there was discrepancies or whether there actually is a firm line in the sand. And I'm honestly at a loss with penalties in Powerchair football. I would love, this is my outcry to teams, right? You've got a long summer break now. Dedicate an hour of training at some point within your teams, with your coaches, with the parents, with all the players. Try and find a new penalty rule for us and send a video submission into the WFA, because I am at a complete loss with it, because I don't think it's fair to even blame the referees anymore, because you're looking for such minute movement, literally in peripheral vision, and if you disallow every penalty save where the goalkeeper moves a tiny bit early, you're sending goalkeepers off pretty much in every penalty shootout, and a penalty save is basically never going to stand. You can't do the whole like you can't do the European thing or the international thing that we used to have where the goalkeepers move up and down the line, because that's an absolute circus and has been seen to be shambolic so many times. Um, it's already sort of like a an illogical thing that you're asking goalkeepers to do by sitting still until the ball is struck, because goalkeepers want, like, you want to save the penalty, your body wants to move, and you're waiting. And as Greg said, he sort of wishes he'd gone a bit more early because, and to be fair, Greg, I know you said you did move early, but there's like you didn't move anywhere near as early as anyone else on the day. You were definitely the most disciplined goalkeeper on the day, and it was very marginal your early movement, and you probably would have got away with a bit more movement. I'm at a loss with it. Like, what do we do? Because the referees were talking about changing the wording of the rules to significant movement, no significant movement before the ball is struck, and then you're just opening another can of worms completely, aren't you? Because what is a significant movement? And they say, oh yeah, but then at least it's at the referee's discretion. But all you're going to get is just more player referee beef because as a result of it. I'm at a complete loss with it. It got to the point where I was saying, should we do attacking set pieces instead of penalties? And you get 3 free kicks like on the edge of the box, and you have 3 defenders and 3 attackers, and you get 10 seconds, and it's just an open play basically, almost like a shuttle type thing. I don't know. I really don't know what to do with penalties, because every single time a penalty shootout happens, it causes so much drama and so much division and heat on referees, and players justifiably getting annoyed at inconsistencies, but referees also being sort of unfortunately caught in the crossfire when they can't really do anything else and they're just trying their best. Yeah, I don't know, Ryan. I really don't know what to do.
I've had this conversation with many people, and I would recommend 2 options. Sorry, you can either because as is the penalty rule in any form of football, it needs to favour the attacking player. That goes without question. So ensuring that and the integrity of that is always a challenge. But I would propose 2 options. The penalty is either taken from the 5 metre mark, so the edge of the box, which gives the keeper more time to react from standstill, or it's taken from where it currently is, 3.5 metres out, but the goalkeepers are allowed 30 centimetres of wiggle room on the line forwards and backwards. So you put 2 spots down on the goal line where goalkeepers can have a bit of momentum, can pivot forwards and backwards to allow them somewhat of a chance of saving it. Because if it's from a standstill and it's on target in one of the corners, it's never going to be saved. And if you give the goalkeepers 60 centimetres to move forwards and backwards, assuming the width of a strike force or your standard sports chair, I think that is another potential option. So you either allow the goalkeepers to pivot and move, or you take the penalty from further back.
Yeah, I don't mind the 30 centimeter sort of wiggle room. I'm glad, Charlie, I'm glad you kind of walked back to your movement, because I was about to come at you because I've watched back the one I saved for Dan's, the winning one, and if I put it in 0.25, I think I've moved like 0.001 second ahead of Dan hitting it. I was definitely trying my absolute hardest to be the most disciplined. Like, I think that's what I took some umbrage was, because there was a few shouts from the some of the Aspire fans about consistency, and I'm going, but just compared to, and obviously I'd love Dan, but compared to how much Dan was moving, and I get why you move, um, it's been fairly consistent. I'm like, I wasn't jumping at all really, if not 0.01 second ahead, and it is, speaking as a goalkeeper, it is ridiculously difficult, because you know that if it's going in the corner, you might as well just sit there and not move, because you've got no chance. So you have to try and jump and move and time it as perfectly as you can. But for me, there's an art. There's a bit of an art to it in trying to time it and get it right and jumping. It's a skill you've got to try and perfect as it is at the minute, as the rule stands. You haven't really got a choice, have you? You either try and effectively cheat and jump it and try and get away with it and hope the referee doesn't look at it, or you've got a referee that is a bit more lenient with it. But as it stands at the minute, you've got to try and work on the art of timing it, and getting that literal pinpoint perfect ability to jump at the right time and time the dive. That's essentially what you're doing, aren't you? You are timing your dive to try and save it, because there's no sort of mystery about where the ball's going to go. You just got to try and hope that it's put relatively close to you, and it's not right in the corner, and then you've timed it perfectly to get it in the corner. Which is why, yeah, obviously we can go back and watch it in 0.25 speed, and we have the ability to do that. But the referees don't. There are some where, don't get me wrong, it does feel egregious as a player. That we had this last year when we got knocked out by Villa. And don't get me wrong, in the game we haven't done enough, and Villa defended really well. But the penalties, the one that Hamza saves from Tyler, I've always said this, Hamza's halfway back to Birmingham by the time Tyler's hit the ball. And there's one I've saved from Bubba that I've moved probably 0.2 seconds ahead of it, and I've been called up for it, and that's knocked us out. Which was like, how can you call one that's seemingly very obvious and one that's like I've twitched? You know what I mean? That was obviously from our point of view. So there's always going to be discrepancy with referees someone's being like a hawk on it. But for me, I think they've got two there, haven't they? Like, it shouldn't be as controversial as it sometimes can be with player movement. So for Chris's second penalty, I was sat there thinking, yeah, he's moved arguably more than he's moved the first time around. I don't know if the argument is he moved, stopped, then moved. So there is some debate around whether you can move before it's hit, but then stop again and then go again, which arguably seems
He's
stupid
stopping. He doesn't stop.
No, he
yeah,
does. He does. He does. I think come to a stop for like 0.1 seconds. But that was a weird. I was thinking maybe he actually hasn't moved early because when the ball was struck, he was stationary for a second,
Yes.
wasn't he?
Yeah, he moved well before Marcus hits it because he knows where it's going, and then stops it's a 0.1. But if that's what's allowed, if that's the skill, can you move, stop, and then go again in the time it takes the penalty player to take it? The penalty taker, Marcus, would then be well within his rights to potentially switch it and play it in the other corner.
It's ridiculous that I don't know this, but can goalkeepers situate themselves where they want on the goal line for a penalty?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, then there's potential interpretation of the laws that just needs a little bit of clarity then with regards to that. But I go back to what you said, Charlie, around significant movement. That is a can of worms that
Yes.
does not need opening. That is a grey area. We need clarity. We need transparency in this sport, not further questions. And I would go back to your initial kind of call to action for clubs to come up with suggestions. So when there is that next review or law to the game, hopefully we can come together as a community and suggest something rather than us just having these individual debates that probably fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and the other thing is, other than Marcus's, which I genuinely believe was quite egregious, like most of the other penalties that got saved in the day were poor. Like my brother's penalty, as much as it was a terrible penalty, like awful, basically straight down the middle, not as much power on it. And if you do just bury it in the corner, you're never gonna catch up to it. Like there is still that margin for attackers to be as sort of be the best they can. And the other thing is Marcus, that one where Chris moved and stopped. That was before the ball was struck, so Marcus could have just stopped and not hit the ball. He could have just, because he hadn't struck it yet, and you're allowed to feint and dummy in Powerchair football as much as you want it by these rules. You're allowed to feint, so he could have just stopped and not hit it, and even maybe stopped and gone to the ref. Hey, look how early you just moved, and Jeff would have had another word with Chris. So it's a very difficult one. Yeah, it is very tough because we don't have in Powerchair football the ability that running game players have the deception factor from dead ball situations. Unless you find a way to like perfectly strike it with the corner of your bumper to put some sort of backspin on the ball, you're never going to be able to deceive a goalkeeper. They're always going to know where you're trying to put the ball.
One, give me a little bit of credit, Charlie, for the penalty save. Come on, I get it's not great, but give me a shred of credit because I'm disappointed I didn't save John Dixon's. But come on, benefit the keeper a little bit, eh? Um, two, yeah, I agree. Sometimes the players can stop. I think it's difficult for those who are you're not even thinking about looking at the keeper. You're lining up your chair with the ball. When you swung back, you're not exactly well. One, don't think Marcus can't turn his head to look at the keeper and know he's moving because he's turned completely away from the goal. So knowing that the goalkeeper's moved is going to be literally impossible for most players in the league. And the other bit of advice I'd say for goalkeepers, and I get Dan was not expected to be in goal whatsoever. If you're going to try and jump, turn your brakes off because the brakes make a noise when they obviously disengage. So the referee can hear the brakes going on and off. And if that noise comes before the goal ball's been hit, they know you've jumped. So I have my brakes off. Well, yeah, I was trying to be disciplined, but I had my brakes off. Ed told me that last year. But Dan had his on. So when I was going for my penalty against Dan, I heard him move and I didn't take it because I said to Pete, look, he's jumping because his brakes again. That's a little bit of advice.
See that the king of integrity, Gregg Baxter, with all the dirty tricks there. That is right out of the
Right.
Powerchair footballing playbook, isn't it? The dark
Ed
arts.
Ed Commons last year went turn your brakes off, and I took it this year and went, you know, I'll do the same.
That's clever. That is very clever.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Uh, let's conclude the debate on penalties. We've kind of had our piece. We've shared our gripes, and hopefully, people within the community can share their thoughts and considerations as well. Because I think it's unanimously agreed that something needs to be reviewed or changed. And I have to say, they have changed it in recent years, and they have made it better. But it's one area of the game that should come with so much excitement, so much jeopardy, but just comes with frustration for the most part. We'll go back to the final once again. Two-part question for you, Gregg. First of all, how good did it feel to assist that? And second of all, the more I watch you, the more confused I'm left with where your best position is. And if you're to force your way into the England senior squad, where is it going to be? Because in Teesside's current system, you're not benefiting as a goalkeeper, as a first pivot, because they don't play that double pivot system. But when you're out wide, you are electric. But it's far harder to force your way into the England conversation in a attacking wide role.
Firstly, thank you, Ryan. I'm just going to clip that for later.
Yeah, go
No,
on, Gregg. Tell us
I've
how
already
electric you are. Tell us how electric you are, Gregg.
I've already called it world class on social media, so I may as
yeah, I
well
know.
double down.
Um, nah, look, I mean, I can't lie, I was a lot more proud of the assist than I was of the goal. Obviously scoring in a cut file is nice, and I was pretty pleased because I've shaped to go far post and then put it in the gap. But I was pretty pleased by assist. It was very out of the Dylan Kelsall playbook, just going all the way around and firing it across the far post. So yes, pretty proud of that one. I can't lie. But I think for me it was nice because I felt disappointed with myself in the Seven Oaks game. I played out wide and it took a while to get used to it with the timing of the ball with the court because we mentioned the court was slower, but I wasn't connected with anything. And so yes, we won the game, but anyone who knows me knows I'm my own worst critic, and I was pretty disappointed with how I played. So to put in a much better performance out wide in the final was pleasing for me, alongside winning it, obviously. To score, get a world class assist. Thank you, Ryan. Was very nice. I did indeed take a bow, Charlie. Um, I think for me, it's obvious from logs and conversations with the coaching staff that if I'm going to break in it and force way in, it's going to be as a second pivot. And conversations we've had at club level since game week 5 of the Premiership, since the season concluding, we're going to try and be a little bit braver, and at least trust me with goal kicks, which we saw uh, in Derby, and that was the other thing. Actually, John started taking goal kicks for Spurs at some point, and I was like, hang on a second, whoa, call me out for it all you like, mate, but so have a word here. But it's something that I want to do, and if I'm gonna consistently, I need consistent 4 out play or at least 3.5 play to get it more under my belt and get used to it a bit more. And it helps from an England point of view if Tyler and I could build that connection um, going forward, and it benefits Tyler if he's playing more of a 4 out because he doesn't have to do everything in the middle, and he won't be doing that for England. So I've taken on a lot of advice, and I never mind. Larg's been good for Tyler. And I think that Largs was good for me, and the camp beforehand, the camp beforehand was actually very good for me. I took a lot of confidence from camp beforehand. Um, was playing a lot more switch balls from the edge of my own box. So, like, for example, I didn't know that my first thought has always been to defend. I was always facing away from where the ball is because I was playing it back across. If the ball's on the right hand side of the box, I was aiming more towards the left. One, because I want to block the ball across, and two, I can just play it back into the winger on that right hand side if I need to. Whereas actually, I need to be facing towards the right hand side because I could play it both ways. Didn't know that. I took that advice on, and that gave me a lot of confidence in camp. And I built on that in Logs. So it actually did me the world of good. So while I'm always happy to play out wide and get a world-class assist and score goals, because I'm crawling my way to 100 National League goals. I'm on 95 now, 96. It's just an added benefit to a team if I can do that. They can rotate and put me out wide and still have some quality. My main position will be in goal, and that's where I want to aim and break through.
Very interesting to hear, but certainly made an impact when you were playing out wide, and it was very nice to watch when Teesside got their football going. I want to touch on the Vase now quickly before we bring our wider kind of thoughts and considerations for the day and what we could change in 2027. Firstly, a huge congratulations to Hull and East Yorkshire, the inaugural champions of the Vase. For those unfamiliar, the Vase was introduced for 25-26 to provide a second cup competition for the teams exiting the early rounds of the WFA Cup. I think as a first stab at it, it was fairly successful. There is things we would refine, we will change for next season, but you can't ask for much more for an inaugural competition. We had 4 really exciting semi-finalists who had the opportunity to play on kind of that national showcase. And the opportunity to lift meaningful silverware. And just like we were saying earlier with the wider Derby Day, the Vase particularly will develop over the next 3-5 years, and the legacy of the competition and the stature of the competition will grow to a point where teams are really going for it. It was the relative unknown for 25-26, but I thought it was great. Hull and East Yorkshire, I probably had them as the favourites coming into the day based on recent form from the National League Championship, particularly the influence of Tyler McLellan, and that came to fruition in Derby. Not just that, something I highlighted on multiple occasions was the classification constraints that normally restrict them at National League level being lifted in the cup competition. The fact that they're able to play a pivot of Joel Rothery and Tyler McLellan with Harrison Smith out wide, who I regard as their best wide player, meant they could have 3 PF2s. And that ultimately is what won them the Vase competition. The combination, the almost world-class delivery of Tyler McLellan and the brilliant finishing of Harrison Smith. I did want GBG Saracens to really have a push for it, but some player selection issues restricted their momentum, which was a shame. And Norwich didn't quite pull on the experience we know that they can do. Same can almost be applied for Teesside. They never felt like they got out of second gear. But overall, I thought it was a great conclusion to the first year of the Vase.
Yeah, I'm with you, Ryan. I thought it was really good. Hull were my favourites going into it. I just thought the Tyler McLellan factor and also the boost that they would have got from that classification, it was really massive. the goal that they scored against Norwich was incredible. Some of the passing football was really good, and Tyler just locked the game down in the centre. For me, Saracens, I actually thought they'd get past Teesside still until the night before when they posted their squad on Facebook and there was no Fred Body, and I just thought that is gutting. That is really bad. Just they had so much momentum. I felt so bad for them because they were right in the rhythm going into that they were probably one of the form teams. They had so much just vibes and energy around them, and no Fred Body. That breaking up that partnership of Tommy Mickelson and Fred Body just I think killed them and killed the momentum. I also think Tommy's a younger player. And while some of the older and more experienced players would adapt quite quickly to some of the challenges that Derby present that we've already mentioned, I don't think Tommy necessarily did that. I don't think he adapted as proficiently as some of the other players did, some of the more experienced ones, particularly WFA Cup players. And I just thought Saracens just really struggled to generate any power on the ball against Teesside Steel. And when Teesside Steel got that goal, which, they always have potential to do something like that when they've got Jamil Khan, who's just got that delivery that's so powerful, and they've got technically good players. When they got that goal, they were always going to go through. And then the final was a bit of a cagey affair. It was obviously a very big occasion for lots of those players. It would have been the biggest occasion they've ever played in, um, and you could tell. I think Teesside Steel, when they sort of let go of the reins a little bit and they sort of cut loose for the last sort of 7 or 8 minutes of that game, I actually thought they played some nice football and did really threaten Hull and East Yorkshire. But yeah, it was at the end of the day a deserved win for Hull and East Yorkshire, and I'd say it was a good day for the Vars. I really like the format. I like the 30-minute games, 15 minutes with like a 2 or 3 minute stoppage in the middle. I do enjoy that. And I liked the jeopardy of there being looming penalties after every game, straight to penalties. I was actually surprised that none of the games went to penalties. I really thought we'd see at least one Vars game go the distance, but no, they were all settled within normal time, which is what we like to see, isn't it? Especially considering some of the controversy that does sometimes follow penalties. Yeah, I thought it was a great day for the Vars, something that should be continued. I think teams will be ready for it next season. They'll really go for it, and hopefully it sets a good precedent. And congratulations again to Hull and East Yorkshire, because they've made Powerchair footballing history, haven't they? If this is a tournament that goes on to run for decades and decades, they will forever be the first name on that trophy, which is nice for them.
Yeah, what's even nicer about it is they went 1-0 up in that final, and we know the format of the games is different. They're more condensed, there's less margin for error, there's less opportunity to influence and impact things because that clock is continuously winding down. They went 1-0 up and they continued to throw caution to the wind. And if you rewatch that final, for the majority of the second half, they've got three players committing forward, leaving themselves so vulnerable to a potential Teesside Steel counter-attack. And that's what I commend. That's what I think deserves them that inaugural Vars, because we've seen teams go 1-0 up and just defend. We saw Teesside Steel do it in the semi-final against GBG Saracens. So overall, a great first year of the competition, and one that we'll be looking to refine and change to make sure that we continue to grow and get better. Now, on that, what would we change for the Vars for 26-27?
This ties into a wider sort of thing. First of all, I'd love us to stream the qualifiers at David Ross. That would just be a nice thing, extra streaming. Don't know whether that's possible or not, to be honest. That's something that I'm just throwing at you now, but that would be cool because, listen, I have said on this podcast and in many places before, I am very much of the view that if there's something that you can point a camera at and live stream on a YouTube channel somewhere, we should be doing it, because the more Powerchair football out there on the internet, the better. So that would be a good change. And then my change to the format would actually be I would do what you said, Ryan, and I would love to have Derby Arena across 2 days. I think that makes the most sense. You could maybe do actually quarterfinals of the WFA Vars at Derby Arena. You could do on Saturday, you could do quarterfinals of the Vars in the morning. You could then do quarterfinals of the WFA Cup. You could then do semi-finals of the Vars. Then on the Sunday morning, you could do semi-finals of the WFA Cup. Then Sunday mid-afternoon, you could do the Vars final, and then followed up by the cup final. That would be my ideal structure of Derby next season.
So that's something that I proposed as a potential option. It was met with a little bit of resistance from the teams that go, what if we exit the cup in the quarterfinals on Saturday morning? What else do we have to play for? Do we have to book a hotel? Do we have to commit to the full weekend, even though there's no guarantee that we'll go through to the Sunday? So I was thinking about that. And then I was thinking, if you can supplement the competitive Cup and Vase football with friendly games, with fantasy games, with something else that gives them something to look forward to, then absolutely, I think that is the blueprint. But at the moment, if you say you go out in the quarterfinals on Saturday morning and then you're out the competition as a whole, I don't think it quite works because it asks a lot in terms of the finances and the travel commitments.
I get that. I do get that. But something in me just says, is that not just the risk you take with cup football? Like teams, if you don't want to risk it, then pull out of your quarterfinal sort of thing. Like, I get it. You've sort of got to hedge your bets. And also, I'd like to hope that a lot of the players, let's say you did get knocked out in the quarterfinal, would still want to attend the final anyway, so would make a weekend of it regardless. I understand that obviously there is a huge financial element, but it's the same thing as like maybe even just playoffs between let's say quarterfinal one and quarterfinal two, let's say Seven Oaks and GBG Knights, they then have a playoff on the Sunday, just as a sort of a WFA Cup losers bracket playoff, just to give them an extra game to play. But I don't know. I think the one I'd rather risk potentially teams staying over and then not getting through and sort of having to deal with that, or having to make the tough decision as to hedge their bets as to whether they get through or not, than have the competition potentially diluted by trying to cram it into one day again.
Yeah, I think you potentially do placing games, Greg.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the placing games argument at all. I think it's just the debate, isn't it, around, well, not the debate, but the fact that it's cup football. Yeah, it's cup football. But obviously in the running game, it's cup football that the teams are paying for. Whereas um, it's a fairly large, substantial um, outlay for someone to, especially with cost of living and fuel prices where they are, like the diesel price getting to Derby, is crazy. So it's a lot of money to be putting down in case you don't make it. And I suppose the argument is, do you want to play a placing game on a Sunday, or do you want to just go home? And then you could turn around and go, well, that's your choice. Um, but is the placing game enough of a draw to risk losing an extra 100 quid for a hotel room, 120 quid for a hotel room on a Saturday night? I'd argue not. I think most people would rather just still go home, especially if they can watch the final. Yeah, there's a part of being at the final, and maybe when it gets more esteem as the years go on, that there'll be more interest in sticking around for the final. Um, so, for example, Seven Oaks stayed around all day pretty much, despite going out first game, which was great to see. Um, I think it's just a minute financially, it's too much of a risk to ask. And how, again, the extra cost to the sport is, how much does an extra day for renting out Derby cost the WFA and the outline, how much you're asking for the sponsors? Like, that's the other thing I want to take consideration. Yeah, it's all well and good in our dream scenario going, we'd have Derby for 2 days, but we know Derby's expensive for one day. Like, having it for a full weekend, you're then asking a real amount of money, aren't you? And I disagree, by the way, with streaming the qualifiers. I think it for those teams that want to get to championship, yeah, they've got to get used to playing under streaming. I think it's just for those younger players who are more experienced who just play regional league. It doesn't put as much pressure on them. They can enjoy it. They can go out and still play with the freedom of just enjoying the day for what it is. I think that's that. I'd be erring on the side of not streaming it.
But do you not think that? Okay, I'm going to push back slightly. Do you not think that those teams in the VARs, first of all, on the streaming thing, that those teams in the VARs are obviously showing willing to get more involved in a competitive sense in Powerchair football by even applying to be a part of the VARs? You know, that they are showing willing to improve, and they're obviously doing it because they want to compete. And having access to your games to be able to watch back, and not because it's one thing, you know, as a player who plays for a, you know, let's say a side that's never played in the National League, it's one thing being able to watch Championship football or Premiership football regularly, but to be able to actually watch yourself back and watch your team play, I think is very beneficial. That is one argument, but I also do understand the sense that increased streaming and increased media presence does increase the pressure on that day. And it does sort of depend what you want that day to be. I couldn't make it this year, which I was actually annoyed about. But yeah, maybe that is different. What I would say about, yes, obviously the WFA it might cost it and say, yeah, we just can't do 2 days at Derby. It's way too expensive, which makes sense. Which I then go, fair enough. You know, like we have a limited pot. And this is not me trying to come across as greedy. The reason I actually mentioned the 2 day thing was because Ryan suggested the 2 day thing, so I thought there might actually be then funds in the WFA pot to potentially do that. But I think they maybe did it as a 1 day thing. My understanding is as much of a practical thing in terms of they wanted it to be all on 1 day as it was like a financial thing in terms of it was too difficult to do it over 2 days. The other thing I would say maybe is you can extend the day potentially. You can push the final back by an hour because I think at that point having a bit more time to charge the chairs and relax between the semi-finals and the final. Although, well, actually, I don't know if it's going to make the players more tired because, you know, an extra hour of sitting around and having an extra hour for your food to digest in your stomach before you play in your next game and stuff might be quite nice. I think maybe spread it out slightly. I'm not going to renege on me saying I want it to be a 2 day thing because I think that is the best competitive environment. And although teams do play 3 games in a day at the National League, that is very different. Because first of all, those days are not guaranteed to be a crescendo, whereas Derby is guaranteed to be a crescendo in terms of you start off with a quarterfinal and the games get more intense as they go along. So the more tired you get, the more intense your next fixture is, which is a little bit difficult as well. And also, I just think cup football is very different. You know, you can go to extra time and penalties, as we saw for both the WFA Cup semi-finals, and that really does take it out of you as a player. I think the 2 day format is best, but if let's say the timings don't change and we stick with the 1 day, a couple of short-term fixes that I have, or short-term improvements, because I'm sure the John Good Group recognize that we all massively appreciate everything that they've done and all the organizers. And this is not me saying it was a not a good event because it was an incredible event, but a few things that can be done to improve it for next year. I think the final needs to feel more like a final in terms of I know that there was unfortunately Derby wouldn't allow like pyrotechnics and stuff. That would have been great, you know, having the big like sparkler things that we see at quite a lot of Powerchair football tournaments these days. But having something other than sort of me trying my best to hype the crowd up over the PA system, having something else to distinguish the final, that was something that was said as there was an aim, and I don't really think they had that big arch that the players come out under, which is really nice. I like that. I thought that looked great. But in terms of creating a sense of occasion for the players and for the spectators, I'm not sure that enough was done this year to maybe make it feel like a cup final. And then that did sort of give people the the feeling of, well, what was the point in taking it away from St George's Park if we're going to just have it as, not as much, like it's just nowhere near the spectacle that it would be if it was at SGP. Um, I think, yeah, that would have been a very quick fix. Would just be to, you know, confetti cannons and a bit more build up to the final, and, you know, pre-match interviews and loud music and teams having a walkout or something like that. Like, I know they came out, but like walkout music and stuff. I think it would have just they need to do something to ramp up the atmosphere a little bit more pre-game for the final, in my opinion.
I don't think it's too far removed from St George's Park. If you was to take that mainstream television element out of it, we're not a million miles off. And it's something we will certainly work towards in 26, 27. The reason I say a 2-day format is because, as I said at the top, I don't think you can have quality and quantity work in tandem with one another. Absolutely right to highlight the potential cost considerations of hiring Derby for 2 days, if it's even possible. It's a centre of excellence for cycling. It's one of the most hotly demanded venues anywhere in England, and we have to typically book it years in advance. So I don't even know if that is possible. I do like what you suggested, Charlie, about pushing or stretching the day out. And I think we could have done that this year because it was on a Saturday. Being on a Sunday, it doesn't work because people are in work or school mode. They're wanting to get back. But Saturday, could you imagine a Saturday evening game under the lights of Derby Arena? I think that would have been incredible, and something it's probably falls on me to do, but something that I'd love to see us prioritize next year is getting those grandstands filled to the max with people, with mutuals, with people that aren't necessarily familiar with Powerchair football. Can we tap into Derby Football Club, which is literally a stone's throw away? Can we tap into local businesses? Can we get new eyes on the sport and fill those grandstands at the same time? I think that would be fantastic. And then just to go back on the streaming element of the VARs, I'm inclined to agree with both of you to a degree. I think if you are entering the VARs, you probably want it to be streamed. You want to feel like it's an event. If you're not necessarily familiar with streaming, imagine if you're a regional league player or a recreational player typically, and you're going to play competitively for the first time, and you can send that link to friends and family. It would bring so many new eyes onto the sport. Yes, it comes with pressure, but you wouldn't be in the competition in the first place if you weren't willing to accept a degree of pressure. The challenge is for me isn't that, it's the logistics. So of course we had 3 courts running consecutively this year. Isn't possible to stream 3 consecutive courts. I suspect the VARs will grow for next season, which may see us use 4 courts consecutively. So how we stream that, I don't necessarily know, but maybe we can have particular showcase matches. We can cherry pick which ones we do show, assuming that we have full buy-in from the clubs as well. I think that could be a happy medium. But there is elements, and to your point of making it feel more like an event, I don't think we're far off. I think if we add that element of music, we add the pyrotechnics, we ensure those grandstands are filled, we give our supporters instruments and things to create that atmosphere, I think we're there or thereabouts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like Aspire probably do it best out of everyone in terms of the supporter coordination. They have the red t-shirts and the drums and the vuvuzelas and stuff. And that is, on some of the parents and stuff, bring an atmosphere, bring an instrument if you're coming to watch, your team play. And but I also recognize that, a lot of the support networks of clubs are just the people that are sort of along for the journey, parents and friends and carers and stuff, and some of them just wanna watch the football and not be as potentially hooliganistic as others. It is, yeah, I think I would love to see the stands full for the final. We had extra seating this year. It would have been great to see that all used, but people are going to stick around. If people are going to stick around, some people would love to stay and watch the final. I think some people. It also depends what the final is. Some people would have stayed and watched it had it been, Teesside Aspire, for example, in the final. Maybe more people would have stayed for that because on paper it's a more even game. Whereas Teesside Newcastle, I think a lot of people would have gone, well, you've got a significant favourite, so I'm going to get home early for my Saturday evening. Um, Maybe there's something to be said for pre drawing the semi-final routes for next season. I maybe would like to see that actually, because one of the other complaints was that, you only get as much time, you basically find out an hour before who you're playing, and that is a bit crazy in terms of you can't really do much. And the top teams, and people that are listening to it, they think this isn't true. The top teams in Powerchair football video analysis the hell out of each other. Like they proper break each other down, like the Premier League do. Like they watch every minute of every game of another team, and so to know at least who out of two people you may be facing would help maybe, and that would have made the quality of football higher because teams would have been prepared more with a tactical plan. Like you think about the Teesside Aspire game. The first half, Teesside battered them. Second half, Aspire battered Teesside, and I think that was largely because Teesside sort of had the element of surprise in the first half, whereas video analysis would have maybe negated that slightly. It's just you just it's hard to find the correct formula because you're putting on an absolutely mammoth day of Powerchair football. But yeah, I think pre-scheduling the semi-finals would be another easy fix, and I'm just throwing suggestions at you now. But yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, you've nicked my idea there, Charlie. That was gonna be my one contribution to like this entire 20-minute conversation. Was gonna be me going, yeah, maybe have a pre-schedule of the draw.
It's
Um,
effortless. It's an effortless change
yeah,
that can be introduced for 26, 27. I found myself the night before wondering why we are trying to factor in a draw because it's not something that the crowd can really buy into. Just do it at the quarterfinal stage, so the brackets are determined. Teams can prepare to a better degree than they could within real time, an hour out, and yeah, it gives you a little bit more time to just rest and recuperate ahead of some of those real crunch games. Easily done.
yeah, that is my 2 pence done for that 20 minutes. There you go.
Yeah, I think I've given about £2, but there we are.
Well, yeah.
No, it's fantastic, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast: is to have the debate, have the conversation, brainstorm ideas, play devil's advocate, play hypotheticals to see how we can get better. Because if this is going to be the pinnacle of Powerchair football, certainly under the WFA umbrella, we have to continuously evolve and get better. And I would probably even suggest off the back of this podcast, we put some sort of form out where we get the thoughts and feelings of the community as a whole, because ultimately they're the ones that matter and they will have things they want to change themselves.
Is that one of the one drawbacks like with streaming is that it got to and to Charlie's point, maybe some people would have stayed more if it was a Teesside Aspire, for example. But the one drawback is obviously people can go, well, we're out. It's a Teesside Newcastle final. I can just watch it on my phone on the way home and get home early and have a dinner and not get stuck in traffic.
Absolutely, it is. But
Yeah, and sorry, Ryan, but for all the, like, don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with streaming it. We all love it. It's obviously a benefit for the sport. I'm just saying that is the one drawback is people can, I myself have thought sometimes I'm like I enjoy, am I going out to Nottingham for the day? No, I can just sit at home and watch on my
it's
phone.
it's why there's a 3 p.m. blackout for mainstream football, because you have to ensure that attendance in person. I don't think that comes at the cost of us completely cutting all the streaming. I think we just
No
have
chance.
to expand, and we have to brainstorm ideas to get new eyes on the sport. And if us three can reference the World Cup in Sydney when they appealed to local schools, and the arena at time was filled by thousands of young school students. Can we not introduce elements like that? So yes, streaming does make it more accessible, but does kind of detract from people being there in person.
It just this is the whole debate we're having, is making the in-person draw that much more important, so that the argument is, oh, I can just watch it at home and I'm not really missing out on a lot, if you know what I mean. That's the draw in it. That's the debate you've got to have over the next couple of years.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say with the in-person draw thing is it was sort of annoying for me as a commentator because I am somebody who likes to I prep quite a lot for games, especially
Mm.
for like big games. And I couldn't really create like I like creating, if anyone's ever seen them, A4, like literally an A4 sheet of paper, both teams on, full squad list, 3 or 4 stats about each player I can go through. And just having a pre-scheduled draw would be so much better for that as well. For you, Ryan, to be able to have graphics ready for the games, for example. Because with a lot of them, you can hedge your bets as to who's going to get through and prepare for the most likely eventuality anyway. The other thing I'd say with the streaming, and one of the things you mentioned, Greg, about it does give people the ability to not stay around. Some feedback I've heard was actually about the headphones and that they actually are detracting from the atmosphere potentially during games with the live commentary stream because people are sitting quietly listening to us, which is great for people that are new to the sport, and they're a great addition for people that are new to the sport and who would like to have the game explained to them and want to know who all the players are and want to know the players' names and want to know the context. But also, when you've got parents that have been, watching Powerchair football for 6 years and they're just sat, it sort of removes people don't talk to each other as much because they've got headphones on. So it removes that buzz of the supporters all interacting with each other and potentially, and also it removes, sometimes when I watch football, I need to shout. I just need to shout something because it makes me frustrated. And that's often when I'm watching football in person or when I can't listen to the commentators. Whereas if a commentator says something for me or is saying something else, that often negates my need to shout. So maybe the headphones is another thing. Maybe we limit the amount of headphones that we just half the amount of headphones we have, all considerations. And I do agree, Ryan, the easiest way is to just stick out a Google Forms, a survey, and just go, right, people who attended Derby, what did you think? And do that for everything as well, do it for podcasts, people that have listened to the podcast regularly. How often do you listen? And you can put an option which is like, I listen every week, I listen only to the bits about my team. And yeah, survey. I love a survey. I'm all in favour for getting as many off-season surveys going as possible and just collect all that data and have a look. Because although I've given a lot of suggestions, I know that, and I would never try and claim that I'm anything more than just one opinion on the matter. And so, getting as many different opinions as possible is definitely the way to go.
100%. And that will be a priority, probably off the back of this podcast, to ensure that we create that survey for National League, for cup competitions, for podcasts, for commentary. And hopefully we can refine our product to ensure that it appeases the masses rather than just the few. Because to your point, I know the commentary headsets do favour individuals that aren't too familiar with the rules of the people. But at the moment, that's the minority that are attending Derby Arena. So, and I never really considered that as an element. If you have got a pair of headsets on and you are listening to commentary, you aren't shouting, you aren't screaming, you aren't cheering. So no, interesting. But I think that overall gives it a good assessment of the day. A lot of successes, far more successes than there were any failures or weaknesses. And that's something we will inevitably address for next season. Just a few more points before we wrap up, because I'm very considerate that we are fast approaching the 3 hour mark, even though this was meant to be a more condensed, compact one, but I don't mind it too much. Next in the calendar, we have got the playoffs to be confirmed definitively, but I can say that we will have a Premiership playoff between Sevenoaks and Teesside Steel, so that will be fascinating to watch. We also have 5 teams within the Championship playoffs, I believe to be Manchester City, Nottingham Forest, Solent PFC, Greenbank Gladiators, and a secondary Middlesbrough team. Whether they go by the academy or the reserves name, I'm not overly sure. So fascinating, because then there is 2 available positions up for grabs. You would suspect, certainly with the Championship side of the playoffs, that Manchester City and Nottingham Forest will be favourites to progress. And likewise with the Premiership playoff, you would probably bet towards Sevenoaks as opposed to Teesside, and that's just the way it happens. You always favour the more established, higher ranked teams. Gents, give me your assessments on the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's always an exciting day, isn't it? Because you want to see new teams fighting to enter our league, and I think that's the best thing about the Vars is that, you know, having been there, and again, you take this point about streaming, but Ryan and I know that some of the teams that are entering this championship playoff have got some real quality about them. And while it's favoured for, you'd favour the teams that are been in the National League system already. From seeing the Vars Day, you know that the teams that are coming in can compete and will create issues for those more established teams. So always, yeah, always great to see having 5 teams. Yes, sorry, 2 in the National League system, but 3 new teams wanting to enter the National League system. Fantastic for our sport, and likewise with the Premiership playoff. Always an exciting fixture. I massively favour Sevenoaks, just because there is that buoyancy, the story, the momentum they've got, the quality of the squad, and the fact there's no Jamil Khan for Teesside still is a massive detractor for them. But it should be a great game on paper, and Teesside still will give it as good as they've got. You always naturally favour the Premiership side, and given the quality they have, the momentum, and there's no Jamil Khan, it's one of those. I'm split, aren't I? Because I should be split 50-50 here. My Sevenoaks loyalty, my Teesside loyalty, torn in both directions. But I'm firmly in the Sevenoaks camp.
Yeah, in many ways, it is like the most intense game of the season for any team. I don't know if there is ever any more jeopardy than literally you're 40 minutes away from either promotion or relegation. I'm glad that it's happening. Not glad for Sevenoaks, obviously, but glad for Teesside Steel that it's happening. And I'm glad for the integrity of the competition that we're confirmed that we will be having a playoff, because that would be bad looks for Teesside Steel, definitely. I think Sevenoaks are firm favourites. They do have that momentum. I think they will complete that great escape, and I think they're better equipped for the Premiership next season than Steel are. They're looking to run trials, as I've seen on social media, Sevenoaks, so they're looking to build on their core for next season, which would be good. Um, I just. I love and hate the playoffs because it is such a heartbreaking occasion for whoever loses. I do think that there's massive in the championship. I doubt Nottingham Forest or Manchester City won't retain their place. I just cannot see it. But also, as you mentioned, I've never seen any of those. I've seen Solent, I think, at regionals down in the southeast a couple of times, but not even recently. I've never seen um, the other 2 play, so it is going to be interesting. It's going to be a good occasion, and it's a very interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because one group of players go off to the WFA Awards absolutely buzzing, and the others have to go, if they choose to go, a little bit downtrodden.
I suppose is the format of the championship playoff to be confirmed, Ryan?
Yeah.
With having 5 teams.
Yeah, I think there's an element of seeding. So obviously Manchester City finishing in 11th will maybe have a more favourable fixture list than Nottingham Forest in 12th. But do not take my word for that. That will all be confirmed as soon as possible, because we are fast approaching it. As mentioned, Saturday, June the 6th. All games should be also streamed on the WFA's YouTube channel. And of course, that evening, we will be hosting our 2026 WFA Awards evening at Leicester City's King Power Stadium. Voting has now closed, so the winners are known. So really excited to celebrate what has been an incredible season, because not only will we acknowledging the achievements from the National League, we now know that the Cup winners and the Vase winners will also be celebrated on the same evening. And we've already all but highlighted every element of the FA Disability Cup on Saturday, June the 28th. Did I say Saturday? Sunday, June the 28th. Tickets went on sale yesterday, so locate the WFA's social media to get your tickets for that. Lastly, before we wrap things up, we can't have this recap podcast of the last 3 weeks without talking about the bombshell that was dropped on Friday, in the fact that Dean Williams will not be standing again for another term as chairperson of the WFA. Devastated is an understatement, but I will throw to you, gents, to give your thoughts and highlight just as how big an impact he's had on the sport of Powerchair football.
Can I just wipe away my tears first, please? Devastated, gutted, just I don't even know where to begin. Dean knows just how much I love that man. He's just been so good for stabilizing, coming in as a fresh set of eyes. Someone who didn't know the sport, which I think is what the sport needed. Just no skin in the game, and has taken it to his heart and to his soul. He breathes the sport now. He's opened his eyes to what sense of community we have, and he's been able to share that with sponsors and people he knows and he connects with in his his day-to-day life and in his full-time job. I could wax lyrically for another 3 hours about the times I've shared with Dean, and I hope he won't be a stranger. I go back to Australia, the times we all had there, me, especially me, you, and me and you, Ryan, and Dean and Alex. We played some table tennis in the hotel. I mean, it was he's quickly become one of the first faces you look for when you enter NTU. You want a hug from Dean. You want to say hello. So yeah, when you text me that news, I was absolutely gutted and crestfallen, and I will miss him massively. Charlie, take over before I start bawling my eyes out.
Yeah, it's not what you would expect to see on your timeline on a Friday. It was not, not what I wanted to see. It's very sad news. I'm gonna miss Dean. Like it's just like, aside from the Powerchair football and governance side of things, which I will touch on, because he's been incredible at that. It's just he is just one of the loveliest guys you'll ever meet. And I just we all have really fond memories of conversations and stuff. And Dean just really took to the community from day one. I admired One of the main things I admired about Dean from the beginning was how quick he was to admit that he knew nothing about Powerchair football, and how quick he was to ask questions and ask you to explain things, and just if he didn't know something, rather than sort of braving it out and doing what a lot of people would do and pretending they knew they're in the know, or just go without knowing, he just asked the question, and he'd always be that person who was showing real genuine interest, and you felt like every time you told Dean something, he was listening intently. So which is he just makes him such a warm and delightful character to spend time with. And it is going to be really sad not to be getting those Dean hugs at Nottingham Trent University in the future. I'm sure that he will have his eyes on Powerchair football for the rest of his life, because I defy anybody to spend a number of years with this community and not feel like you get drawn back to it. I imagine that we ever do host a World Cup here in England, if we ever do see Champions League here in England, Dean will be there somewhere in the crowd in his England shirt, supporting. I assume he'll be watching the England squad in Buenos Aires later this year, and yeah, he leaves with the best wishes of everyone, and he's also left the sport in an incredible place. We saw the announcement recently that the John Good Group have extended for another 3 years. That's massive news. They've been incredible partners for the sport, and as much as we've thrown a lot of feedback at them in this episode in terms of how to improve the event with the WFA Cup, the fact that we even have such an incredible event to be able to improve is largely thanks to them, and by nature thanks to Dean, getting Slater and Gordon involved, headline sponsors for the National League, getting sponsors for streaming and for the podcast, and the opportunities that that's presented to everyone. On a personal level, the fact that I managed to commentate at Lincoln on a professional football game, that never would have happened without the spotlight that Dean puts us all in. So yeah, we're gonna miss Dean. Everybody that I've spoken to about the news. I was at the Aspire Spring Camp on Sunday, and even players that have never even played in the National League, and their parents were like gutted and were asking, what does this mean for the future of the sport? And while Dean is irreplaceable, I am very confident that he's going to leave. He will not leave until he feels that his baby, which has been the WFA for the last 3 years, is in very safe hands going forward. And I'm sure, even though it's a setback in the short term, good times remain ahead.
Yeah,
sorry, right. Can I just, there's a point about Charlie saying that if we host a Champions League or host a World Cup, Dean will be there. It'll also be testament to the work Dean's done in the last 3 years if we do host a Champions League or a World Cup or a European Championship. That's what we've been building towards. He's come in, stabilised, brought in a 3-year plan, and set us up for the future in ways that I don't think a lot of people understand truly and realise just what he's done for the sport. And it will only become clearer over the next few years, I think, just what he has achieved in the 3 years that has gone under the radar. Would you agree, Ryan?
wholeheartedly, yes. Obviously, Dean come in, assess the situation, and then after kind of 12 months of due diligence and fact finding under his belt, he implemented that 3-year strategy, which we're currently about to go into the last year of. Everything is stemmed from from him. All the work around governance, structure, partnerships, long-term planning, which often kind of happens quietly in the background, he has been central to. He has brought stability to everything. He's a very calm leader, very meticulous. And to your point about hosting a competition or where the sport may go now, it all is going to be built off the foundations that he has helped build. So when you look at where we are compared to where we were 3 years ago, the growth of the competitions, the stability in our partnerships, as Charlie said, the increased visibility, the wider opportunities, the development of the England pathway, he's had a significant role in shaping all of that. So yes, absolutely gutted and haven't quite processed it yet. It will still take a little bit of time, I have no doubt. But I think what Charlie said was very, very important. He will not go until he knows it's in safe hands, because whilst he is leaving, it is still his baby. He has helped mold and shape it to what it is, and he will be part of the recruitment process, and he will probably be part of a handover to his soon-to-be successor. So yeah, a lot to process, a lot to get my head around, a lot of potential change coming up. But we're doing everything now from a position of strength, and that's the biggest distinction from when we was going from the last leader to Dean.
I'm just gutted my commentary dream team's being broken up, to be honest. Just gonna. But I think the other thing we've got to say is at the end of season awards, please form an orderly queue to give Dean a hug. Uh, don't be fighting over it to give him a goodbye hug. Please form an orderly queue. It may go out of Leicester Stadium across the whole of East Midlands, but please form an orderly queue. And I think us three will be fairly Towards the front.
I agree. So it's a big thank you to Dean. I'm sure we will probably dedicate an episode to talking about his impact, his legacy, and what he has helped the WFA achieve over the last 3 years. I think, gentlemen, that all but wraps up a very interesting conversation about the last 2-3 weeks, all the events, competitions, initiatives, etc. Not many call to actions or places to signpost our listeners to. Obviously, FA Disability Cup Powerchair final tickets now on sale. If you want to find them, they can be located on the WFA's social media. Next up is the playoffs on Saturday, June the 6th, followed by our sold out end of season awards. So we will probably see most people there. But from me, a huge thank you. Thank you, Gregg.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Cheers, guys.